on Rocket, but I imagine he'll show up in a minute. So maybe call this. Good. Okay. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Hartford Select Board on Tuesday, December 5th, 2023 at 6:01 p.m. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means in summer all the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. One member of this public body or other staff is present at the location to ensure the public can participate if desired. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. A member of the public or the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email at selectboard@hartford-vt.org. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary due to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by a roll call vote in accordance with the law. As required by open meeting law, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance of all members participating in the meeting and have those members attending remotely identify themselves to ensure that they can hear and be heard throughout the meeting.
Lanny here.
Rocket? No Rocket yet. Alan?
I'm Allie, I'm here.
Mary?
Mary here.
Dan?
Dan Fraser, I'm here and I can hear you. I'm on Zoom.
Thank you. Kim? And I am also here. All right, so our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would anyone like to lead us? Okay.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, Gail. All right, order of agenda. I don't anticipate any changes. So we will go to public comment. We'll start with people in the room and then hear from those who are participating by Zoom. If you'd like to comment publicly, please come up to the microphone, identify yourself and your town or village of residence. You'll have 5 minutes to speak. No personal attacks, and please address the select board as a whole. Pat? Alana?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm Pat Attilio, a resident of Queechee. First of all, I'd like to thank all the members of the select board for what they do, for the thankless hard work they do week in and week out. Tremendous, so I appreciate that. I apologize in advance, but tonight I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be one of the people who talks about something that's a topic that's only indirectly related to town business. Recently, another Hartford community member came before this board to take issue with the Black Lives Matter movement. In the process, they made a multitude of misleading, irrelevant, and often bizarre claims. Their brief comments, later repeated on their own right-wing website, were mean-spirited, divisive, and hardly consistent with Vermont and Hartford's goal of being a welcoming and inclusive place. So after much reflection, I decided it was important for me to respond to these comments rather than letting them go unanswered. I promise I'll be brief. First, a bit of history. The Black Lives Matter movement started in 2013 in response, as a grassroots response to the Trayvon Martin shooting and the subsequent acquittal of George Zimmerman. The phrase Black Lives Matter itself soon found its way into onto lawn signs and front lawns around the country as a show of recognition of and protest against the continuing poor treatment of so many Black people in this country, particularly at the hand of our criminal justice system. Since then, there has been a continuous and growing backlash to the use of the phrase Black Lives Matter. All lives matter has become a common response whenever Black Lives Matter is mentioned. Now, I agree wholeheartedly that all lives matter. I really do. In fact, it's a fundamental of my approach to life. However, someone saying all lives matter seems to assume that Black Lives Matter intends to mean only Black Lives Matter. This is a clear misinterpretation of the intent of that phrase. A better way to say that Black Lives Matter, perhaps, would be Black Lives Matter too. Look at it this way. If you have a typical town with a bunch of houses, and one of those houses happens to be on fire, would you send fire trucks to all the houses in the town? No, you send a fire truck to the house that's on fire. Yeah. So many Black people do not feel safe today in America. They don't feel safe in Vermont. They don't feel safe in Hartford. I've spoken on many occasions, one-on-one and in groups, African Americans living in Vermont. Common theme that I hear is that they feel under constant scrutiny and distrusted by people in the cities and towns where they live. Must always be on alert, with heads on swivels, it's a quote, to avoid bad situations. Black people move to Vermont. Some have lived here for generations, but many move away again. They feel isolated, unsafe, like their lives don't matter. I'm a data guy by stripe. Over the past few years, I've created and maintained a website that documents racist incidents and experiences in Vermont. I invite you to Google Vermont True Stories, Real People, and read through that page. It's a long page. The feeling of being unsafe is even more true for students of color in our schools. Black students in all ages of Vermont are subjected to a steady stream of racist taunts, jokes, and bullying. Is it any wonder that those of us who are deeply concerned about this situation feel the need to say Black Lives Matter? Is it kind or sensible or appropriate to criticize and deny this obvious truth? I leave you with this thought. All lives matter. All lives won't matter until Black lives.
Thank you, Pat. Any other comment in the room? Come right up to the microphone. You got one?
My name is Jennifer Kravitz. I am the Vice Chair of the Housing and Homelessness Committee. And I just wanted to express my support for the Housing Development Pilot Program as a budget item. I think that it's a great idea that needs to be maybe fleshed out a little bit more, but it's a wonderful starting point, I think, for us to move into facilitating increased housing units in town. And so that's really all I just wanted to say. I think it's something that's a great idea and something that we can do and something that we should do.
Great, thank you. Any other comment in the room?
Good evening, Tim Ferriero from White River Junction. And I guess I'll start off with thanking all of you guys. I know it's not as much of a burden, but I've watched all of your meetings in this budget process on the television. Thank you for covering these meetings. I just wanted to go over a couple town budget thoughts. As you guys, I know you have to deliberate tonight and work through this. I don't want you to have to stay till 10:11 like you often have to. So, but I would like to read through some thoughts around the budget. So I think the current budget development model is reasonable, but perhaps does not get to the long-term pulse and direction of the community needs or wants. I suggest significant outreach and dialogue around pertinent topics before this budget process starts next year. what we spend, departments, what we anticipate needing, then more, I'm a little more fuzzy on the process from there, set a target like 3% kind of thing, then hash out how to get there or promote new initiatives, spending to test the voters' stomachs or pocketbooks. It would also be helpful to see more general graphical view of the budget at large. Select board may want line item by line item, but for voters, it is helpful to see a broader overview. Everyone here has good intentions and a high level of expertise, but how do you ascertain and balance this with your community year to year, short of just the budget passes? Is that the scorecard for all of this? I think we get better outcomes with community engagement. Whenever possible, segregate out larger decisions for the public to decide, or at a minimum, engage in deeper engagement and discussion before presenting it for consideration. My general overlay philosophy is perhaps considered conservative. I think you should manage what you already have and take care of it exceptionally well before developing or creating any new programs or positions. There will always be demands for something, but some level of fiscal discipline and longer range planning is wise. Focusing on the rate distorts the reality as the grand list continues to grow, and we cannot assume this is sustainable or frankly even an accurate depiction of property value at large. Incidentally, the school portion of the tax bill, the largest portion, has become anything but local. As you grow your grand list and your student population varies, the current fiscal and philosophical origins of this have become a disaster to all towns, and frankly, students of Vermont. No one seems bothered by this. Hartford should be very bothered and should demand a complete overhaul of school funding. I believe whenever possible, to decide whether any expense belongs in the common good for bucket or use it and you pay for it bucket. Our enterprise funding models are excellent examples of seeking this overlay. There are other aspects of your budget that need an overhaul with this in mind. Trash and recycling programs are a great place to start. Those who do not use curbside services should not be paying if they do not have the ability to benefit from the program. How are our surrounding towns running these programs? Has anyone been working on this? And our transfer stations decline over many years? The local option tax is bad fiscal practice, both philosophically and in effective governance. It was promoted at its passage as a way for more revenue, easing the tax burden, and a reasonable levy on rooms and meals consumers. Take a big snapshot of this program. Total rooms and meals sales, 1%, but Hartford gets less than 1%. Currently, in a competitive and difficult business climate, this is now 11%. I understand there are several towns of Hartford size that have implemented this over the years, and it makes sense in a town of limited industry like a tourist town. You're taxing a particular sector of business which already pays significant taxes in Vermont, who virtually in all cases is a low impact, cost, high net return transaction, and then choosing to use the funds for expenses unrelated to those businesses, actually a more common shared expense. And it was never sold that way when it was proposed. We should be incentivizing their success in our community, not punishing them. As a reminder, you don't keep the dollar local. A large portion goes and remains in Montpelier, not Hartford. The impact to revert back to putting those expenses in the general fund property tax rate where it belongs for common shared expenses would be minor and more equitable to all concerned. Finally, please define and clarify the following, and more importantly, create sound fiscal policy overlays for the terms used often in confusing fashion for most voters: unassigned, unencumbered, and capital reserve. I'm almost done. The unassigned funds currently sit at $3 million. Isn't this really unspent accrual balances that belong to previous voting taxpayers? Their assumption that X dollars would be spent for X need? Seems as though that should be set back to zero at each budget cycle as an offset to the budget. Emergency funding should be addressed as a clear and segregated set of reserves with distinct and restricted uses. Obviously, our bonded funds should be utilized where suitable, but with a moderate and balanced view in congruence with the school bonds. So finally, I just want to, say that this overlay and this process is a ton of work, and I know you guys do a ton of work, but I really think that you would benefit by doing a significant amount of community outreach throughout the year and really get a handle on some of these larger concerns and challenges we have in the community. So thanks for listening.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just point of clarification, really. I heard you make 3 points, basically critiquing the local option tax. The language around unassigned, unencumbered, and was it emergency? And the first being engaging the public better in the budgetary process. Now that first point you made, which is the last one I brought up, to me, the point of these meetings being public, part of that is engaging the public. I understand that it's not easily accessible, the format we do, 3-4 hour meetings, but do you have specific, it's very easy to say that, but I'm wondering if you have specific ways that you think that we could do better in terms of engaging, because I feel like we're all pretty available and we do have these public meetings.
Just a quick thought, when we did do the town manager search, which was a great process, I think, we went specifically to each library as kind of a token of a gesture of effort. That is to say, hey, you have to come here at 6 o'clock on Tuesday night or whatever. I think it would be a much more effective approach to identify, say, 3 challenging topics as a town, and then doing outreach as that is to say physically, locating in Queechee or some of the other villages and doing like a deep dive and kind of a Q&A type session. I think it would really be a nice gesture to really send a message to citizens that, you have, and maybe change the timing, because for a lot of people, to be honest, this time of day, they have kids or they don't, and evaluate what other times and slots that you guys as a select board could go out and do that outreach.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comment in the room? Not, we'll go to Zoom.
Yes. Go ahead, John Hemmer.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, my name is John Hafner. I am the chair of the Housing and Homelessness Committee. And like my fellow committee member, Jen, who spoke earlier, I just wanted to voice my support for the Housing Development Program. It's listed in the memo from the town manager to the select board in this agenda as a accessory dwelling units line item at 150,000. And I think that there's a tremendous promise for a program like this. We've seen other towns implement similar programs. Woodstock has done so, Rutland City has done so, and there's a lot of space here for Hartford to take leadership within the region, to partner with community members to add and to diversify our housing stock. And there's just a lot of opportunity, and so want to voice my support for that to be included in this year's budget, and to thank you, as others have said, for all of your work that you do. I know this is a busy time of year for you and making complicated decisions, so just want to thank you for your service to the town and for listening to the support from community members.
Thank you, John. Any other hands on Zoom?
Okay, it's another one.
Okay.
Person with the telephone number ending 0680. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, it's Melinda Brooks, White River Junction, Vermont. Hi, my only comment would be that during public comment, there seems to be, I can't hear what people have been saying. There seems to be typing or papers being moved around. So that's my only comment, is that there's just background noise during public comment today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I would say select board members, if your mics are too low, that could be something to do with it. Thanks, Melinda. Any other?
I think they pick up, they're very sensitive. No, that's it. I just want to hear everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Rocket.
Question to Nick, is it possible to cut our mics while people are speaking?
Not zoning.
Okay.
Any other hands on Zoom?
No other hands up at the moment.
Okay, so we will end public comment. So we come to our main item, the budget review wrap up. The first of what could be a number of meetings. It's an opportunity for us to, have our questions resolved, certainly to look at the budget as it is right now, and even have some scenarios run by the town manager, like if we wanted to say, what does it look like if it's a 3% or a 5% increase? How does that look? Right now, it looks like this budget, which I think includes everything we've talked about, is a 15% increase, which I don't think any of us find palatable. So we can talk about, ways to reduce that, what that would look like, including use of the unassigned funds, things like that. So this is an opportunity for all of us to engage with John and the department heads if need be. So unless you have any preparatory remarks, John.
I can kick off with a few if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
Chairman.
And then we can open it up to everybody.
Sure. I just point out that the board has now observed budget proposal presentations from each of the department heads. We're now left with the task of massaging revenues and expenses to achieve balance, a good value for Hartford residents, we hope, with an associated property tax impact that residents can afford. We can take a look at revenues first and expenses later, or the reverse. It doesn't really matter, but at some point, the board will need to voice their thoughts on how they would like to have the finance director and myself make revisions to the current draft in order to achieve that balance. And there's many options available to the board, which some of which I've outlined in a memo to the board, others of which Gail might have a better handle on. But we do have department heads present, either in person or via Zoom. And of course, we do also have several other dates available in December for future meetings.
Okay. Maybe?
John, and Gail both, I guess. Is there a way to look at this budget right now and tell us what it would take to lop it down to like 10% or 5%? Is there a way to look at that, to give us a number of how much money we'd have to cut from it?
Yeah, I think at least again, in my memo to the board, I provided some options to reduce, for example, expenses, but also to increase the revenue estimates that we've got. For example, there are several lines that I have not yet discussed with Gail, but which could bear some tweaking. I see that we've been conservative with pilot assumptions. We've been conservative with state current use taxation assumptions. We've been conservative with delinquent tax penalty assumptions. Fire prevention might bear some scrutiny. I'd be curious to know how we're doing so far in this fiscal year, because they had quite the banner year last year. Ambulance services is another area. Interest on deposits might be a little bit conservative. And we, of course, want to also talk about the big enchilada, which is what sort of transfer from the fund balance the select board might like to make. All of these issues could have a benefit in terms of maximizing our estimates as to revenues. Then we can go look at the expenses kind of department by department, if you like.
I see that as far as a way to generate more funds, but my question was more centered on, if everything were left the same as it is, what would it take to cut out of the budget? That's the question.
Yeah.
Not as opposed to what it takes to get more money. What would it be to just purely cut out of the budget to get to, say, a 10 or 5%?
Well, it depends whether you want to take a more selective scalpel approach, or whether the board would like to just advise Gail and I to achieve it one way or another. Certainly we can wield a meat cleaver, but I think a scalpel is probably better with expenses. The budget does factor in several things that have happened in recent years, last year and a half or so. First, of course, we had that inflationary spike that all towns across the country really dealt with. And in the way that Hartford dealt with it has been a compensation study designed to help the town retain and recruit good talent to staff up our departments. That was not inexpensive. That was done between budget years, between budget processes.
Right.
Since then, of course, there's been union contracts and a proposal for matching 4% increases for non-union employees effective July 1st for the new fiscal year. Of course, we're also dealing with continuing pressure on health insurance. I believe the increase is 14% that we're looking at. So some of those numbers are sort of baked in. But yes, there's always ways to look at each line item and judge it carefully based on the actual experiences we've had and whether we're being appropriate or maybe too cautious with those assumptions. I will point out that there's several other baskets of funds that are out there that can play a role in reaching this balance that we're looking for. There are uncommitted ARPA funds. There are lot funds, local option tax funds. There's even, for specific use purposes, an opioid settlement amount of money that's available to the town. And those are, I think, some of the moving parts that we can all work together on to try to find this balance that we're looking for.
I don't understand the opioid thing. We haven't heard about that.
There's, I believe, Gail will correct me if I'm wrong, $66,000 in an opioid settlement that I think some of the larger towns in Vermont received, but they can only be used for certain purposes. Who knows whether those purposes might be redundant in some way with what's in the police department's budget, for example.
This is the first time we heard about this.
One quick thing, Rob, before I get to you, is that, you know, in each of the last 2 years, we've assigned $1 million from the unassigned fund to help provide tax relief. I don't know if that's low hanging fruit, but it might be something we want to agree on, since we've done it in the past, and we do need to get this budget increase down. So that's just something to think about if there's consensus on that. Rocket?
Right, so and this sort of builds on what Tim was saying about the unassigned fund being over $3 million in balance. I think the way our town operates, right, we tax every year and then we spend every year. And I think that while I do think that operationally having a cushion is important over the course of the year, when it gets to the point where the unassigned budget is almost 15-20% of our operating budget, it seems like a really thick margin, which to me, I'm actually, it's over the point where I'm comfortable because we are holding taxpayer money and not spending it. I think it is a good opportunity, Mr. Chair, to utilize some of that here, because if last year's inflationary spike, which John, you mentioned, was not a good opportunity for us to then use our reserves to cushion that, then why do we have a cushion? So I think that I think it would be prudent. There's a lot of things I think in the expensing that makes it difficult, which you mentioned, just the salary increases, the contract negotiations, the healthcare increases, the price increases of building materials and so forth. There's not much that I think we can do about that without firing staff or reducing services, neither of which I think the taxpayers would want. But I do think that in terms of cushioning this, I think that it's probably a good opportunity to tap into these funds. I know ARPA does need to be utilized, assigned certainly by the end of next year. I think we should lean into that. But I would also say that I would like to stay conservative on the revenues. I don't think it makes sense to be liberal about our estimations with that. And so, yeah, I would be very much an advocate of reducing our unassigned general fund balance to $1 million, which would be about 5% of our budget. And I think also, I don't know, the tough thing right now is also that our tax assessments are so out of whack because our last assessments were done in 2017. Mm-hmm. And obviously that the market has changed so much since then that Tim is right that I don't think we should take it as a given that, oh, every year the tax rate goes up, because if it's like 1% this year and in 5 years it's 2%, well, what does that mean 20, 30, 40 years down the road? Is it 20% of your tax valuation? It doesn't make sense. The way that is offset is if the grand list grows, the tax rate can stay basically the same, yet tax revenues can continue to go up. So I think that it would be in our incentive for there to be a reassessment, which I know we're in progress on.
Stay tuned for our next meeting. I believe there will be proposals.
And so I want to also say that like the tax rate increase that we have right now is jarring, and I would agree, not acceptable. I would also say that if it were balanced against a more accurate grand list, it might not be as jarring. But I do think the ways that we can work on it right now are to assign funds that are just sitting idle, because right now our funds are making like, I think our ARPA funds are making 0.75% or something, or 2%. 1.5, 1.25. Thank you, 1.25%. I mean, we're not making good money on the interest. And I don't, and nor are we an investment vehicle for taxpayer money. It is our job to take the taxpayer money and then to deploy it. So I think we should move towards that.
Thoughts on the unassigned fund? Is that something we can come to consensus on?
Yeah, but now I think that might be a good segue for, if I can just introduce an idea of the potential for a different practice. It wouldn't necessarily impact the fiscal 25 budget, but I think it's something for, I've sort of hinted at it a little the last couple years, and I think like have discussed with Gail and Don, we all have such incredible faith and admiration and respect for the finance department that I don't think anyone really wants to ask them to change practices, but I'm gonna propose that we might try to do that. And I've written down how to do it, so I'm not just trying to wing it and explain, because I'm not super confident in my public speaking. So
If I may though, if I may, how's that gonna impact this budget?
I think what it is we've talked about it before, how the way that I go line by line through the budget is I look at each item compared to what we actually spent in previous years.
Right.
And what this is demonstrating is that we're not actually looking at apples to apples if we're encumbering funds for different purposes and or using salary savings to pay for budgeted expenses. And then it looks like, you know, oh, well, in fiscal 23, we only spent, you know, $3,000 instead of the budgeted $37,000 and things like that. So I think, sorry. Can I just read through this and
Yes, you can read.
Here's some impact.
The select board has one opportunity to influence the budget during the budget cycle. And then once and if the voters approve it, all the funds are allocated administratively, which makes sense. I am in full support of budgeting conservatively for both expenses and revenues to avoid shortfalls. What I would like the board to consider is to fully understand the allocation of encumbrances and salary savings and how they are accounted for. If funds are encumbered because they are identified as directly tied with a specific project or contract, that makes perfect sense to me. However, if unexpended funds are encumbered for the general purpose of, say, select board training or materials and supplies without specific obligations, I suggest that they be added to the unassigned fund balance instead. With this practice, unexpended funds provided by taxpayers can then be used as a way to offset the general fund for the next fiscal year to reduce the overall tax burden. Additionally, when future boards are considering department expenses year to year, they will be able to ascertain the actual amounts used for each line item rather than seeing zero or small amounts due to, quote, use of encumbered funds. And I cite a couple of examples of those line items. Once the budget is finalized, the narratives are typically removed from the published version, which makes the context of low or zero line items more ambiguous. Likewise, with salary savings, if there is an unbudgeted and emergency expense that arises during an active fiscal year and salary savings is a potential source to fund it, that seems reasonable to me. However, if salary savings and projected salary savings are used to fund budgeted expenses, it can skew the perception of how much is needed to fund those expenses year to year. Like with encumbrances, if there are unexpended salary savings, I suggest they be transferred to the unassigned fund balance and used to offset the next fiscal year's budget. So that's the end of that general concept.
May I ask you just a quick question to clarify? Because I'm just listening and can't read it. Are you suggesting that we also just keep track of the actual expenditures? So we have the budgeted and then the actual expended amounts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we don't have, I mean, like you're saying, with salaries and things, we don't have a lot of control year to year. I mean, in May, over $200,000 was spent on salary increases to bring the town up to the 65th percentile. that was done with salary savings.
Right.
I support that. I feel like I was a little surprised by that looking back. I don't really, I think, fully comprehend what was happening until well after the fact, but there it is, and then we're looking at 4% increase over that. So, you know, for example, when in many of the budget presentations this year, we saw the phrase due to impacts of the compensation study. And that's when I started going back and saying, well, wait, what was the impact of the, and those were paid with salary savings. I would like to think that throughout most fiscal years, we are not going to increase salaries by that much. So I'm thinking in theory, there are potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars that are being used for alternate expenses that they weren't originally allocated for, which I'm not saying there's certainly are going to be circumstances when that needs to happen, but I don't think it should happen for, I don't think funds should be encumbered and brought forth for things that are not tied to a specific account. And we've talked about this, and one way to address that might be through the purchasing policy. Like it might be that I might try to take a stab of how to incorporate this kind of practice into our purchasing policy so that, anyway, I'm trying to articulate this in a way to see if this makes sense to the board, if it is, if it's just me. Like, I feel like I'm kind of echoing what some of the things that Tim said.
John?
Just to follow up, I believe that a lot of these savings recur because of the difficulty to staff up in a couple of departments. Police and DPW have been traditionally departments that we budget for full staffing, but we fall short because it's hard to recruit for those positions. So I guess one further discussion one could have is, should we change how we budget for those departments on a more pessimistic assumption? Or should we continue to aspirationally budget for full staffing, knowing that that will continue to generate cost savings that would need to be dealt with in one way or another?
Go ahead, Danny.
I think choice A is, I mean, unless there are positions within departments that really aren't, they're not going to try to fill, then that's one thing. But otherwise, I would want to budget for the aspirational staffing that we want, and ideally fill those positions and spend that money on those purposes. But if those positions aren't filled, then put that money back in and give it back to reduce the tax rate in the next fiscal year. I mean, it's the only second best option to writing individual checks back to each taxpayer, which I don't endorse.
Danny?
Yeah, I see this as being somewhat of a burden for tracking purposes. I don't disagree that it would be interesting to see it, but I also see it as a bit of a micromanagement that we as a select board shouldn't be getting involved in. I see that department heads are given a budget, and just like the town manager is given a budget, and the department heads are given a budget, they should be able to utilize their budget as they need to. And if it means, you know, that they need to take from salary savings to get something that's gone over a little bit, they should be able to have some sort of flexibility going through the finance director to be able to do that. I think there's got to be some autonomy here that the department heads have to be able to utilize their budget in the most constructive way that they can. And also, the town manager has that ability to take from one pot to another to pay for things. So I see it's, well, I don't see how you're going to be able to track this and still give them that ability to have that autonomy to utilize their budgets as they need them.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Rocket.
Manny, I think those are different things. I do, this is part of what you say, I agree. I mean, we should be able to track every dollar spent. Here,
We do, being that
I'm just saying,
the finance director gives us a
of
report.
course, I'm just saying on the accountability side, there should be 100% every cent is accounted for to the taxpayers, right? So I think that's on the accounting side. I think the discretionary side, I do see your point. Where we create the budget, the taxpayers pass it, and then it's allocated, but then it is left to town manager and staff for how they spend. So I see both sides, Kim, because I actually do think that you make a great point that seeing what last year's expenditures were would be really helpful for us to say, maybe we should be budgeting off of historical spending and not off of historical budget, because the spending is the reality and the budgeting is the projection. And actually, by tracking the variance between those two, what we budget and what we spend, whether it's positive or negative, actually helps us get more accurate over time. So I think that's a great point. I think two reservations I have with that. One is sort of what Lanny said, where do we create an environment where people feel like we're like overly looking down everyone's shoulders of, hey, why was this spent here and not spent there? And so does that sort of like infringe on that sense of autonomy and operational autonomy, let's say, that we want to give our departments and support them in doing that? And then the other thing, and this is less of a concern, but is a theoretical concern, is if you have a certain amount budgeted, a hypothetical department has a certain amount budgeted for specific line items, to keep that level of budgeting up, funding up year over year, there becomes like a subconscious incentive, let's say, to make sure you're spending to that amount to keep that up. Now, I totally understand that's like, that alone is gonna, I don't mean to suggest that anyone in our staff or departments would do that, but I do think that there can create unintended consequences of this incentive to do that. Whereas when the finance director, town manager, and the departments have this latitude to basically move money as they need operationally throughout the year, I think my sense is that there's a greater sense of trust that can happen of moving things around. It's a balance. So I'm not saying either side of it, because I do see your first point, Kim, of we should maybe budget off of reality, but I don't know. I have to think about it more, I guess.
Is this a proposal for this? Is this something we would do going forward? Not
That's
that
why
I think it's a bad idea. I just
That's why I wonder what
it's
it's doing for this year, you know, what's it gonna help us this year?
Okay, I think I'm bringing it to the attention of the board now because I think if we look at our budgets utilizing this, I think that it would be a way to, I think that it is a way to look at a couple $100,000 at least of a big chunk of resources that we need.
In this year? For this
Fiscal
budget?
25, I don't know, I mean, there's
I'm
already
yeah.
projected salary savings to be used for some things in fiscal 25. And
Yeah.
there's even some in the budget book for encumbered funds from 25. So I don't know what that is, like what, you know, we're in the first quarter in fiscal 24, but I guess it's relevant to the budget process. And so I'll come back with a proposal for the fiscal 26 budget, I guess, for it.
Well, yeah, it sounds like there's some interest in the idea for sure. Mary, and then Rocket, and then I think we have a public comment.
I just had a quick question, Kim, and I think your idea is very interesting. What about projects that departments bring to us where we have no actual information for? Where will the funds come from that? When it's, you know, you're talking about, okay, so I'm looking at something that has, you know, $12,000 actual in 22, 13,000 in 23, but here, you know, now there's something new coming in where we actually don't have.
Oh yeah, that would just be any project. I mean, we would ascertain funding that for sure.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying don't add new projects or don't.
No, I know, but I was just wondering then if we try and get closer to the actual, when we have something that doesn't have an actual, you know, that just becomes just a new budget.
Yeah,
okay.
And there's like, for example, even in revenues, like they've added in this version of the budget some revenue for parking meters,
right.
You know, so that wasn't in there before. So that means it's, and then there's other things that have been in there before that are not in there now. That line is still there until we across enough years that it doesn't show up anymore.
Rocket and then Tim.
Yeah, just a specific question, Kim. So that question you answered, of what's the relevance to this budget here? You said you feel like there might be a couple $100,000 worth of budget savings that we can find in that.
I don't want to speak to that, and I mean,
Okay.
I think we've gone through one quarter. What are the, you know, what are the salary savings for the first quarter in fiscal year 24 that we're in? Also, you know, we talked about it, the encumbrances that we approved in September for fiscal 23 ending was 2.74 million, and I'm sure most of that is tied to contracts, as discussed. Probably a lot of that has already been expended, like, you know. So say the end of the fiscal year was June 30th, these funds were encumbered, 2.7 million. You know, probably a lot of invoices and bills have come due that were applied to fiscal year 23 that have been paid. So, you know, the ideal, like, maybe the next time we get a finance update, if we get a current total, like this might be down to 1 million or something like that by now.
Where's that document?
We approved it on the September 14th meeting, or we approved it at a September meeting. I don't know what. Date it was, 13th.
Kim, just to clarify what you're saying that fiscal year 24, we could use that the first quarter as a guide in some respects of projected spending?
I would not recommend budgeting for projected savings, but if there is.
Then I'm not understanding your point, I guess.
So say, for example, if salaries totals, just say there's $1 million in salaries across the departments. And so one quarter of that is $250,000. And of that $250,000 of the first quarter, are there 30,000 that are not expended? Are there, you know, like what wasn't used in the first quarter?
I see. Okay, so you're looking specifically at salary savings.
Well, salary savings is one area and encumbrances are another.
Okay.
So those are two. And I also agree, I think we're starting to get consensus. I also agree that we need to keep the unassigned fund at something between 5 and 10% of the operating budget. I'm open to debate on that. But what I'm saying is that my preference is for any of these excess funds to not be held out in encumbrances, but just go in the unassigned fund, and then at the end of the budget cycle, we're putting that money back in to offset the tax rates.
Jim?
Three very quick thoughts. You guys have to sort of recognize that you've been through an incredibly tumultuous time, both in leadership and COVID and staffing and a whole range of things. So the forecast is looking much less stressful in terms of this sort of like unfilled positions and, you know, missing our account manager and et cetera. So I think that that's kind of just give yourself credit there, right? That you've been through this sort of pretty rocky, unpredictable thing. In my company, we have had 3 years straight of double-digit health insurance increases. Now, you guys are in the people business. When I ran the school board, that's all it was, right? And so I've always found it a little ironic that the timing and design of the contracts for union, I hope I get safely to my car tonight, are offset from budgets. Now, why can't we as citizens say, wait a minute, because it's a people business and it's people expense, and these contracts are negotiated in a budget that's not forthcoming, why aren't they lining up to be contingent upon a past budget? Makes sense to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, you guys you'll agree to a contract of a union or whatever, and yet you haven't even set a budget for that future cycle. So it's like, wait a minute, like we're agreeing 80% of our expense before we've even gotten to the process. To me, doesn't make any sense. So, and then the final thing is, I think Kim brings up a really good point, and I think the fuzziness is lying in what I call cash and accrual accounting, because what happens is we sort of assume that every year that it's sort of reset back to zero and then you start over, and there's all these sort of like lags and leads on expense and revenue. And so what happens here, from my perspective, is nobody's done anything wrong. It's just a matter of like the police department wanted to fill 3 officer positions, they didn't get filled, and they're sitting on 180K or whatever. And that's perfectly normal. I think it is a wise and prudent thing to think that, okay, moving forward to the next fiscal, the police still will want those 3 officers. So you have to kind of segregate that and protect that money. You can't just sort of say, oh, well, that didn't get spent, so let's send it somewhere else. I think you have to kind of predict that that slot of need is still there. So I think that's why
Salaries do
people
not
are
get
getting confused around that, so, thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Can I get $1 million from the unassigned fund?
You can get 2.
1.15, you know what we want. I mean, that's something I think we can make a decision on, and that's a concrete step to reduce the percent. So we've done $1 million each of the last 2 years.
I wonder if Gail has any thoughts based on what she hears from auditors as to
Yeah,
what's an appropriate percentage of the budget to hold in reserve
yeah.
for the unassigned balance.
It's not necessarily specifically what the auditors are saying. Normally it's, you don't want to go any lower than 5% of your operating budget, and then it's up to the board for the taste of what you want to do.
So to go to 5%, what would be able to have?
I have to sit down to do the
$1 million.
calculation.
I mean, it
Sorry, I
also
don't have.
depends on what our final budget.
It really depends on what your
is.
final budget is. I mean, right now you're at a 15% increase from last year till now.
But if we took $1 million out of our unassigned right now, we'd still be left with.
We'd still be above 10, yeah.
But it's gonna take a combination.
Yeah.
I have a question about the unassigned fund in the 10090111.
It was used up to this. It was
What page are you
upstairs.
on?
Just pick it up.
So there was
What's the line item again? I'm sorry.
Did you pick up the pack?
100901110100.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is it okay over there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the 15% increase. Like where that figure came from,
What? Oh,
the 15% tax rate increase,
just that,
because mine is at 25.
What? You get 25.
I got.
Like maybe
Can I understand, like, I think that, it just shows the actual amounts for 22 and 23 being 0 transferred.
That means that there was not a transfer done.
So, don't we approve transfer in 23?
Why would we transfer?
I see where you're going. I see.
Because we used other sources of funds? Okay, that's helpful. So this is also, so it's just kind of like one thing or another. So, so we have budgeted $1 million transfer for 24, which we may not need either if we're using these funds. So I guess that's another way to look at it. Like, we're saying one way we want to fund the fiscal 25 budget is to take money out of the unassigned fund. But if it's anything like 22 and 23, other funds will be used in other ways and the money will not actually come out of it, because we won't need it, because we use salary savings and encumbered funds.
Right, so basically what happened is we overtaxed last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's my
And
point.
we have been, for year over year, we've been overtaxed.
Or underspent.
Oh, yeah, right, I'm gonna say overtaxed.
Yeah. Okay, if I have some specific, sorry, and I'll start with revenues. Okay, so just right in the current year taxes, the first 10,030,100. Did the department head requests column just mostly stay the same in that, and then the revisions are the town managers? Like, there's several areas where the column 4 is different than column 5 in the November 30th book. So for example, with the current year taxes, why would the department head number be different than it's like 106,000 less for the town manager? Is that just because of alternative funding sources, or?
I didn't update the
column 4, okay.
for revenues, unless it was something specific.
Well, but then why would it have changed? The tax, is that because that is what, you're changing the expenses so that impacts the amount we would collect in taxes? That's why that would change?
So column 5 is the working column.
Okay. And I did notice just in the October 25th budget book that we had, and then we got the November 30th, the actual amount of the fiscal 23 current taxes actually went down a little bit too, and I was wondering if that had anything to do with the audit, or like column 2.
Correction. 23 column was not finalized, it was not finalized until the audit.
Until the audit, okay, that answers that. And I would like to, John touched on the interest rate, the interest on deposits, and I guess I'd be curious to know comparable to that 23, like, is our interest rate comparable to what it was in fiscal 23?
No, it went from 0.25 to 1.5.
And that's not the ARPA, this is regular general fund.
It's all general fund.
And it's just because of what the bank is offering.
Thank our treasurer.
For going down?
No, we're
Our
not.
treasurer, the town treasurer,
Okay.
for going to the bank and be more aggressive with getting.
Well, they're charging out 7 and 8% on mortgages, so that you think our savings accounts would be.
And they're in like money market, I mean, what is?
Kim, it went
Where
up.
is the account?
It went up from 0.25 last year to 1.5 this year.
Then we should be budgeting more for interest income.
It depends on how much money you have.
Depends
earning
on how much
interest.
money you have in the bank.
Right, but if we have at least, I mean, is the unassigned fund collecting interest?
The unassigned fund is not a physical bank account.
Well, this is what I get. All right. I mean, anyway, I just feel like that's an area that would be great if we could, or if funds were in, you know, if even $100,000 is the money market where you're getting 3% instead of 2%. But, okay, I'm gonna leave that to you. I'm just saying, it's like it goes 53,000, 210,000, 45,000, 50,000, 50,000. Like, it's a big difference. So I'm surprised that we would not anticipate at least another $50,000 or something.
That might include ARPA funding.
No, it does not.
Oh, it does not.
No, I
Okay.
already checked on that.
But the other thing is that if we're gonna spend down the unassigned balance, fund balance, then the interest rate is gonna fall. I just don't think this is the right line item to be.
Okay.
That's my opinion, just because it depends heavily on what we have in there, and interest rates are fluctuating for factors out of our control. So for both of the reasons, I think. I don't think you're wrong per se. I see where those numbers are way out of whack.
Yeah.
But I think that it's better for us to just be really conservative about it.
And that would be a case for which, great, if in fiscal year 24, we actually do get 150,000 in interest income in that place instead. I would love to see that go into the unassigned fund and then be applied to the tax rate next year, which is kind of what would happen anyway, would you say? Yeah. The difference in, okay, yeah, so the difference in income, okay, that's it for me for revenue.
So one thing I think we can do, it's just the first of many, is we could say, put $1 million from the unassigned fund, cut this, and this, John and Gail run the numbers. Or we could say, John and Gail, we don't want to go line by line here, give us a budget that goes up 3% or 5% or 7%, and then they can look at us. I mean, I feel like, you know, if we can agree on an amount from the unassigned fund, if we want to review some of these expenditures that are new and see if we still want to keep them in, I feel like we can give them better direction than, you know, we gotta give them some direction here, you know? So I don't know if that's an approach the board would be interested in taking or not. Gail?
There's a couple more scopes. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think having a set percentage is great, but I just want to caution you all again, there are some expenses, the salaries and benefits, you're looking at like a 15%, 17% increase. So if you're going to say that, it needs to be 3% outside of the salaries and benefits line.
That's fine. I mean, if we choose that way to go, you know, maybe we'll note that. Rocket?
Mr. Chair, I think we should allocate at a minimum $2 million of the unassigned fund. And the reason why is last year we allocated $1 million and basically none of that was spent. So if we allocate $2 million, we might still come back with $1 million left over. Spending 2 out of the 3 million in unassigned fund. I mean, this is just taxpayer money we've collected, we're just holding on to, right? Spending 2 million of it down leaves us with 1 million. 1 million over, let's say the operating budget less revenues is $19 million. So that's about 5%. It's actually a little higher, it's like 6%. So if we keep unassigned fund balance at $1 million, that's about a 6% reserve, which is within the range of what Gail just said, reference, right? I would be comfortable with that as a level. It also would drop what we're taxing significantly to 2 over 19 as well.
We still have, there's still a lot of topics we have to discuss that might be adding to the budget.
Sure, I understand that, but that at least will help with the tax rate increase right there is offsetting, using taxpayer money, they've already spent it, to help offset some of the tax increases. I do think Gail's making a great point, like there's some things with salaries and benefits that we're just like not gonna change. So I think to at least allocate that gives us some breathing room to get a big step forward. Now, I'm also admittedly a little confused, maybe my numbers are wrong, of the percentage increase, because I have a 24% tax rate increase, not 15.
Which numbers are you using?
I'm using this color-coded sheet here.
Oh.
Where we have for a $250,000 home, fiscal year 24, the actual rate, let's just say is $1.08. And then the estimated change is 26 cents. So if you divide that 26 over $1.08, that's a 24% increase. So I think that we have a much bigger gap to close than we initially anticipate, unless my numbers are wrong, but that's sort of the percentage.
I think if you go to page 63 of the general fund and look at the difference between the 24 budget that was approved and the 25 budget. That's 8 million. Comes out to 15%.
I got 13%.
So it's the column 4 and column 5 difference?
Column 3 and column 5.
Yeah.
Column 3. Oh, yeah,
Column
sorry.
3 is the approved budget.
Right,
Column
right.
5 is the proposed budget as it sits at the moment.
Okay, so
I have to put it on my phone, so-
yeah, so that's a 15% budget increase. So what would explain the discrepancy between there and the effective tax rate?
The numbers that the expenses that are shown on page 63 covers all funding sources. The stuff that you're looking on the cover. That is just the tax rate. Not to be confused, the overall budget, 15% change, and then the color-coded one, the taxes.
Right, so it's a 15% total budget increase, but less revenues. Less revenues will have a 24% effective tax rate increase. Is that correct?
You have more service revenue coming in, but obviously more tax revenue is required.
Yeah.
Because the overall budget is higher.
Right, so the budget, the tax rate is increasing faster than the budget is increasing, and that's probably because the revenue is not increasing as fast. Is that-
Correct, so last
Okay.
fiscal year, or 2024, we only needed 15 million and some change for property tax revenue. The way that the budget sits right now, we need 19 million. So that's a huge difference.
Right. Okay, but I think the number that we should be concerned with specifically is the number that taxpayers are gonna have to pay. I mean, we should of course be concerned with the budget as well, and they're certainly related, but I think it is important to note that there is a in our budget, there's a 24% increase on property tax, which is pretty high. To say the least. So two things, and I'll be quick. My vote would be that we really spend down the unassigned fund balance. And then the second thing is that with the forthcoming tax reassessment, that should actually significantly change the tax rate favorably. Assuming property values have gone up since 2017, which I think they have, then that will.
Well, usually these revaluations are done to be revenue neutral.
Oh, revenue neutral, sure, but the effective tax rate is going to go down.
Right.
So I think that will be a benefit to. The thing is, if we spend the $2 million of the unassigned balance now, and let's say we don't touch the budget at all otherwise, and we approved it, that kind of leaves a big problem for next year's select board. And so, but I do think though, with the forthcoming tax assessment, there will be a little bit of balancing. I don't know if I'm speaking clearly here. Does that make sense to you?
I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it's a new opportunity to discuss tax rates and equity in the process, because that's the whole point of the revaluation.
Right, exactly.
We could run it with like 1 million and one with 2 million, right? Just get like what the difference is. I don't know how people feel about the 2 million, since it is more than they normally put in. Yes, Tim, and then Kim, you have questions?
Great discussion here, by the way. When I used to do the school budget, even back then, the other one that I know you guys have your mind on and needs to be addressed is CLA. Because in the school budgets, you would have years where you would even increase the budget at all and it would go way out of whack, or vice versa. And the way the formulas work in the school funding, this CLA thing is a big problem child. And so you may not think that matters to you, but at the end of the day, when they get that full tax bill, what goes on in the school and what goes on here is all connected, obviously. And so this CLA thing is a statewide huge fiscal crisis. So to the extent we can focus on getting that reappraisal and getting that CLA back to 100% if possible, would be a huge win for Hartford.
Thank you, Tim. Kim?
Another piece that's probably audit related, but that there's the transfer encumbrances in 10-921, 544. That was in the October book, the amount was like 67,000, and then in this new book it's minus 125,000. Like, can you just translate with them? 10-921, 544, 0112. It went from a positive 67,000 to a negative 125, 135. I guess I don't understand what that means in that context. So,
Kim, what page?
on page 62. And I just want to point out that I talked the other day with Ken Parker, and we were talking about how, like, my first year on the board and older times on the board, like, part of the budget process was the board went through the budget line by line together. So I would also advocate for that. I know it's not tonight, but
No,
I mean, I don't know how many of you do go through it line by line. I hope you do, but
Gail and I do, that's for sure.
yes. And it's not, I mean, I do find that through most of the operating budget, we're gonna talk about those other, these big ticket items that we're in capital things that we're looking at. And I'm curious, John, do you know, I think we had talked about it a couple meetings ago, see if we knew about if the school had any bonds planned at this time?
I'm not aware of it, but the answer is I don't know as I sit here. I'm sorry to say.
I mean, that would be a helpful thing to know for maybe the next wrap-up session.
Mhm.
I think we've managed like the last few years to not overlap having a big bond while the other one did, and I think there's some stuff we're gonna end up bonding for. Do you want to talk about some of the, so anyway, I think, is there anyone that doesn't want to, and I guess I should see if Dan wants to chime in here. Dan, just chime in if you want to at any point. I think that, you can assess if there's consensus that we want to use unassigned funds. I think, why don't we get to all the other things that are going to add to the.
Sure. Do you want to go? We can go through each one of the.
Oh, and there is a hand up.
big ticket items.
Dan does have his hand up. Go ahead.
Say Dan.
Yeah, I think we do need to look with Gail's guidance. I think if in Rocca's discussion, I think it makes sense to move more closer to the $2 million from the unassigned fund balance there to reduce the taxes since the money's there. I think that's important. I think as Tim has alluded to as well, there's been headlines which I don't fully understand. I don't know if the state does, but there's this elephant in the room of the 18.5 property tax increase, and I wonder how that for education. I wonder how that is going to impact us in the town of Hartford. And I don't know if reaching out to the school board on that level would be good information for us to have too, because we don't want our budget to increase 5 to 7% and then get that increase from the education side as well for taxpayers to have to look at. So I think a discussion with them, if they have any information, which I'm not sure they necessarily would. I'm not sure if the state has fully solidified that, but it'd be good to at least find out where that conversation is going.
Thanks, Deb. So do we want to go through the expenses and the list of sort of bigger ticket items?
Yes.
See if we want to do.
I'm sorry, just the workers' comp and the property and liability are final amounts.
There is their final, correct, so they're based on budget.
I would say, this is back to Tim's point of how much transition our town has been through in the last couple of years. These are just high level notes before we got in. I'm very much in support of a low to no tax rate increase. Just keep things as stable as we can this year, use unassigned balance. I would also say that as far as big ticket capital items, I personally would punt on a lot of them because putting money aside first off is then just holding more money that the town is going to hold. And we already have the problem of holding too much money, in my opinion, unspent. And then the other thing is with interest rates right now being high as they are, I think it's not a good time to bond. The Fed has stopped increasing rates. So hopefully the rates will start to fall over the next year. And next year might be a better time with more stability, with more longevity of our leadership to then look at capital campaigns. And maybe even play catch up at a cheaper rate.
Thanks, Robin. So it's the board's pleasure. Lanny?
I'm all for using unassigned funds. I also think we need to take as much advantage as we can of what's left over for ARPA. And the lot is the hard part because lot needs to be voted on by the taxpayers. So we have to be very careful on how we use those funds and how we sell that to the voters to approve that. But with that said, I don't think that we can just straight level fund the budget. We have to increase taxes to be able to provide services for the town. If we don't, we're going to be hit extremely hard down the road. It's the old adage of kicking a can down the road. Some of these things that we can get now will cost us, 33% more next year. And it makes sense to get them now. Especially if there's grants out there that we can, have matching grants to go with that. I think we got to take advantage of those opportunities. And as conservative as I want to be, I believe people expect a tax rate increase, but they certainly don't expect a 15% tax increase.
Thanks, Lenny. These are all great points. I think I've got a majority consensus for 2 million from the unassigned fund. So I'm going to write that down.
Without it being finalized.
Without it being finalized, yeah.
Everybody's hand remains on the chess piece until you attach it.
Well, I could even go 2.5, seeing as we didn't spend $1 million this year.
Let's do 2 million. All right, I'm just going to make that as a note of something that the board has consensus on at this point.
You have a way to figure out what that's going to bring us down to, Gail, for?
They will. I don't know if they can do it right now.
We can't do that on the fly, probably. Right. No, I understand. How do we want to go this? We want to go through each department?
Do we want to start from the memo John sent, look at some of these expenses that are new and then some of the other issues and things that we tentatively approved and go through and see if we want to fund them all?
Can I?
Yes. And then
Yeah. The thing I would just, the way I would go about this is just, I'm spitballing here, is that go down through and see at each department that each individual wants to examine. We may have departments that we all agree are fine and dandy, then we don't need to spend the time on there. That would be my suggestion. But we can re-examine every single department, but it's gonna take a lot more time. I think there's some departments out there that are perfectly good that we don't need to look at. But that's my
Talking
opinion.
about the operating budget? or
Yes,
these-
operating budget. Yeah.
Like not the bigger picture stuff,
Like the vanilla, smaller budgets, like
Yeah.
IT,
Correct,
the
yeah.
clerk's
Each department's
office.
budget, I think that we have some department
Assessor.
heads that have done well to bring us like I have no problem with finance, auditing, no problem there. Public Works, I think did a good job of bringing things in, conservative budgets. Those are the kind of things those are huge. I mean, Public Works is a huge budget, so that's one that I personally don't need to examine. But that's my thoughts on how we want to go about attacking this.
Other thoughts?
yeah. I still have questions, but
You can keep asking the questions. I just think sometimes the best way to be productive with our time is to focus on something we're all looking at, but we can say like, public information officer, yeah, let's keep it, or no, not this year, right? Because
yeah,
these things are the big, these are some of the bigger, I mean, the big cost drivers are like salary and insurance, but this adds up to a lot too, right?
Like,
Jim?
proposal for local option tax, like in these big things. So
Yeah, sure.
and with respect to him, I disagree on the local option tax. I think it is an excellent resource, and I personally hope that we adopt a charter that includes a retail local option tax. But also in light of that, who pays the local option tax, I think that funding like town beautification that probably needs to happen through contracted services, because I don't know that our current departments are staffed. I mean, I walk through every town in the Upper Valley and everything's decorated and beautiful, and I walk it downtown White River Junction and we've got duct tape on our light poles. Like but even in like Queechee and Wilder, like I think some downtown beautification, whether it's that 30,000 or whatever, could be a good use of lot funds, plus also maybe the Lyman Point Park capital. I mean, I think that's something that is really like enhancing the quality of life for the town. That would be something that I think the voters might be supportive of.
So to put that before them to define
Yeah,
beautification and the Lyman Point Park playground.
And that wouldn't be all of it. I mean, that would be about 250, 255.
We have other things like we're doing the cemetery through lot this year.
We've done this
That's,
before, right?
We've done it before. I just want to make sure we don't.
Yeah.
We don't spend more lot than we have.
I still have something I'd like to introduce to the budget, but
What?
I'd still like to have something introduced into the budget.
Okay,
And I don't know if now is the time to.
sure. I mean, we might as well, but I think Kim made a concrete suggestion. Do we want to try and use the lot for the Lyman Point Park and the beautification? That would end up being about 255,000.
That would be a better sell to the voters.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's. I don't have any objection to doing that. What do we think?
I think it's good.
We'll direct that for some of the lot funding, unless Gail has a
Well, keeping in
concern.
mind that you did have a request from the fire department for funding for the ambulance too. So,
Which was what, about 200,000?
correct.
Is that the only other department staff requests for lot?
No, yeah, for a lot. Yeah. ARPA, we've got other hands up for that, so.
Okay, so, Mary?
I just had a quick question for Scott. I was thinking about this, and the ambulance. If we ended up with a community nurse, do you think that we have less need for an ambulance?
No.
No, I don't believe that. You wouldn't see that level of impact.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a proposal for the Lyman Point and the beautification be funded by lot
And the ambulance.
and the ambulance. The ambulance is something we could use ARPA funds for too, right? In part. I mean, how much lot funding do we have?
404 as of 10/31.
I'm sorry.
Lost option tax.
237.
So we have,
237.
after we pay the obligation in February, we have 237,000 if we were not to collect anything else.
Okay,
But if we were to add the fiscal year 25 lot expectation of 200 more, right?
could we reasonably expect that there would be enough lot funds if we put all three of these items before the voters? So the Lyman Point at 225, beautification at 30, and then the ambulance at whatever that was.
200,000.
How much?
200,000.
200,000.
The 225 was for the park, and what was the other one? Like,
2 point
Beautification.
30,000.
for how much? 30 grand?
30.
I would suggest we stick to two. I like Lyman and beautification because we
But
might.
wasn't there a lot request for the ambulance?
It does.
Sure. But my point is, my real point is that I don't think that we should spend money we don't have yet. So we might project that we'll receive revenue at 200,000, say fiscal year 25. I just don't think we should spend money we don't.
And we don't get an ambulance.
So all the revenue is projected.
No, I mean, there's about current balance of $238,000, right? So that's money in hand, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that it seems a little reckless. It seems, I don't know, imprudent, let's say, to, like, for example, with COVID, if you look at the COVID lot numbers, right? It goes way down and then it goes back up. I just think like we should probably budget for what we know we will have, and what we do have control of is cash in hand. With something like the lot, it's different than taxing, because taxing, we know, assuming it's approved, we know what we'll get. But spending lot in advance of receiving it, I think is.
But they must be able to estimate the sum now.
I think Gail had said
Ally?
200 was a conservative guesstimate, right?
And then I would leave that as a gift to next year's select board to budget out.
Well, I have if not funding the ambulance through lot, I am curious. I know wouldn't be the full amount, but it seems like we need to do more research on what the opioid settlement funds actually covers. And I'd be curious if an ambulance would be a potential use of that. That seems obvious to me, but again, I haven't looked much into the settlement, so I would be curious if I'm happy to, and if other staff would be willing to support finding what that could actually be used for, and if that could be used towards the ambulance, or what other things that are on this list of expenses.
The board actually acknowledged the lawsuit that was going on and chose to participate in it. And there is certain funding, certain uses of it, which did not include purchasing ambulances. Hands-on service within the community.
It's preventative and after-school programs, so potentially some Parks and Rec stuff, potentially some community nurse. Stuff like that.
Maybe the resource specialist that PD is proposing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful.
So we do have 66,000 that came in a couple different deposits, but so it is there, but as I spoke with John, it's not something that I would recommend that you take and put into the operating budget for. You have specific programs that you would like to use it for, then that's fine, but knowing next year, you're not going to have that funding. So if you're thinking about using it to fund a position or a program or a service that would be reoccurring, you're not going to have that funding next year.
I'm just gonna say, these kind of things should, in my opinion, should never be used for position. They should be one-time cost only, because, that's.
Rocket?
Just take this with a grain of salt, because I'm just doing this here on my computer. But if we assign $2 million out of the unassigned fund balance, it looks like it drops the effective tax rate from 24% increase to 11% increase. So, which is a nice step in the right direction. Again, if I'm going to defer, take this again with a grain of salt, but if we can drop another $1 million, we bring the effective tax rate increase to just under 5%. So if that gives.
We're still gonna add some stuff.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We're still gonna add.
We're still adding some to that.
Yeah, I'm just saying with current numbers that we have. I mean, this is very rough, and I would not.
Yeah, remember, this is like rough stuff. So do we want to at least get kind of the numbers run to, like, if we did line and point beautification, the ambulance is probably a lot of funds. If we do have a concern that there may not be enough lot funds, then we can take one of the two big ticket items out, right?
I'm fine for that.
Okay, does that sound good? Remember, we're just running numbers, so.
Yep.
I hear your objection, your philosophical objection, Rocket, but, you know, we can come back and revisit this. Tim?
I think I'll make one more comment and go away to my home. My main objection to lot is related to just the philosophical overlay of how it's collected and how it's spent. So, you know, my clear recollection of when that was sold to the citizens was that there are impacts indeed for people dining and staying in a hotel, whatever, for the town of Hartford. So the rationale would be, and it would be more palatable, that therefore the expenses that are that's used for are somewhat attributable to that. So as an example, in my opinion, police and fire departments expenses make more sense to me to be use lot funds, because those are departments that are often impacted a lot for those industries. Okay, so that's kind of just to clarify why my aversion to lot exists. It's not only that it is collected, but then how is it spent? So thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay.
Okay.
Ryan has his hand up again.
Yep.
I was wondering if it would be possible if we assigned it for the unassigned for the lot funds, if we funded the two smaller requests, and then any additional money that was left would go towards the ambulance, which may not cover all of it, but if we set aside in a fund to fund it either in the next year's budget or the year after, so it was just set aside before that, and that would allow us to use the maximum amount of money, but yet if we didn't meet the full amount, we would still have it earmarked for that cause.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Mike?
Yes, Lenny.
Yeah, Chief, what is the current status of the reserve funds for ambulance reserve?
Yeah, I was just gonna put my hand up to clarify.
Yeah.
So first of all, the ambulance is ordered.
It's ordered.
Yeah, it's ordered. We've been waiting over a year and a quarter now for a delivery time. The timing of the reserve transfers. So in this budget, there's another transfer happening into the reserve account. It'll bring us close, if not completely, to fund the ambulance that's on order. My ask during the budget presentations were projectedly, we're seeing that we're going to need to replace a piece of fire apparatus in 2027, upwards of $800,000 to $900,000. And that we've successfully asked the taxpayers to pay out of lot for the ambulance, and we've been successful in that. And then by using lot funds to offset the reserve account, there'll be more down payment available to purchase that fire apparatus in 2027.
What's the total ticket price for the ambulance?
It's about $315,000.
So you're saying use the lot funds and some of reserve?
Correct. To fulfill
What
that
percentage,
complete purchase.
how much do you have in reserves right now then?
I don't have the number in front of me, Lanny, but I think I projected it back when Gail and town manager discussed it. It would, if we paid 100% of the ambulance out of a lot, and when it's due to arrive sometime in 24, 25, that they would spend down the reserve account to near zero.
What's your replacement cycle on the other two ambulances that we're gonna be looking at?
So we just purchased one, and then this one has been on order for a while now. I remember we did that flip flop with funding mechanisms.
Right.
The last one was paid 200 from Watt as well. And then this one is coming on the heels of the one we just,
And then
this is replacing a 2016.
and then the apparatus you want to get, it's how far down the road?
2027, so it's the purchase of fire apparatus is going up considerably with inflation, and then the delivery time is, once you place the order, they're about 3 years on the delivery. So we almost got to start designing it next year and putting an order in to get it 3 years down the road.
When you get the refurbished engine back, will that help to delay?
We're reusing, equipment we have. It's a 2006 piece of fire apparatus that we're intending to refurbish for the purpose of
Was that engine-
operating out of the Queensy station.
Engine one? or is
Engine
it-
three.
Engine, okay.
Engine three. It's the
Yeah.
rubber tanker.
Yep, okay.
There's currently 127,000
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's 127,000 now. If you approve the transfer in this current budget, it'd be another 180 on top of that, getting us very close to the 100% of what that ambulance costs.
Didn't you send us recently the reserve balances? Sure they did.
Today.
All right, I feel like we're making some progress. So we got the unassigned fund, we got the items for lock, just to look at least. Do we want to go through some of these expenses that are noted and just discuss them more, Kim?
With the cemeteries, I think I brought it up last year, but I don't think we did create a reserve account, but I wonder about how people feel about creating a reserve account for cemeteries for the foreseeable future when it's going to become our responsibility.
I'm fine with that.
How much
I think
were
we
you
gotta look at
thinking?
getting
Even
a,
if we started with like 35 or 50,000, I mean, like, at some point, it's gonna be our thing, so if we could put even like 30,000 a year in, maybe like in 5 years, that'll at least be.
are we gonna look at having a
Offsetting cuts?
cemetery commissioner plus
Yeah.
maintenance cost of it, so.
Well, I think if we do a reserve account, it wouldn't necessarily be for a commissioner, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what kind of expenses will be entailed, but
Just to have money when whatever expenses they are come up. right?
yeah, I mean, kind of like we have with the climate reserve, right? We know that there are going to be expenses associated with it. I personally don't have any idea what those would be like. You know, like so currently we have our cemeteries are managed by various different entities, but that statutorily at some point we are going to.
I gather that we're aging into a situation where we might be getting into the cemetery business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the costs for the cemetery? What's the budget on? Oh, I'm just wondering what the cemetery costs in the budget are. Or just an estimate.
What their deaths are?
Yeah.
34.
$188. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yep. And I know we have the idea of possibly of a reserve.
The libraries are back in, right?
Yeah, that was just because I read your body language in response to the library people, and I gathered that that's what you wanted done.
Yeah.
Back
It
to.
was just unnecessarily
general fund.
distracting to fund through the law, even though I don't think that's how we're gonna get out. All right.
Did you come to a conclusion on the cemetery reserve?
Didn't, I
Not a
mean,
conclusion.
I don't know how
I mean,
much.
how about I would propose, we're not making motions or anything, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I would propose $25,000 to start a cemetery reserve. What do you think?
I'm fine with it if we can cut 25 elsewhere.
Well, one question I have, which I'm sorry, I keep discovering things. So the advanced transit appropriation, is that one that, sorry, I'm just on that page under the cemetery. It says revised from 84,000 to 0, but then it didn't, because are we still expecting them to petition?
We expect them to petition, but as I understand it, we don't budget for that expectation. That's just an increase to the budget if it's passed by the voters.
Well, it's in there. It says decrease, it says change to 0, but it's actually still in there, both columns, 84,200. And I was expecting that might be because we are anticipating them to petition.
No, it's certainly expected that would be zeroed out. Is that not right, Gail? For petition, yeah.
Page 37, 10/4/25, B160101.
That's just me making a mistake. That should be 0.
Right, so there, I just saved you $84,000. That we're probably gonna have to spend
Excellent
anyway.
work.
We're probably gonna get back.
So we're probably gonna get back. So it's really good that it's in there.
Rocket?
I'm opposed to setting aside 25,000 for the reserve. I mean, I just think we're holding so much money already. I would rather see a really comprehensive capital improvement plan and management plan where we're like stacking. Like, I think it's better that we know what our priorities are in any given year and what the next 2 or 3 years are, so that every year we're taxing, we're spending, we're making purchases. Because the longer we save and hold reserves, like, we're basically taxing people, so that's money that they no longer hold, but we're just holding it in Escoma. And so effectively our entire community loses money on an interest rate. I do think it's fiscally prudent to plan ahead, so that does make sense. But the practice of just building reserve accounts for all of these things, to me, adds up to a gigantic amount of reserve. It's like we're saving as if the town's going to retire.
And it's not as specific as identifying the need for a specific truck for a specific department.
Exactly.
Maybe we need to learn a little bit more about what this money might be used for.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good.
And in the same way that every department basically has a plan for its capital needs and is sort of planning out in advance, I think if you just look at that as a microcosm and echo that to a larger scale, well, what does that look like from a town level? Can we do that? So now we're integrating all the needs on any given year from every department, working collaboratively with them and making purchases every year. Because if we keep siphoning off reserves for every department and everything, all of a sudden we have a ton of little reserve accounts that are doing nothing but bearing interest for.
They're saving for bigger expenses, but then if you think a cemetery commissioner would be something that you would want in fiscal 25.
Yeah, I mean,
And then that would be the person that could potentially develop the cemetery plan.
that's what I would think would be the person to have, because when we start doing that, we're gonna look at having our own, their own equipment for cemeteries as well as their own staffing, but it's kind of a seasonal thing for staffing, but that person, the cemetery commissioner, could be utilized otherwhere in the town during the, winter months.
How much does it cost to have a cemetery commissioner?
I have no idea. It's something we could ask the town manager to research.
Definitely could. I'm not sure I knew that there was such a thing.
I feel like the cemeteries, May's talked about this a number of times, like it's gonna sneak up on us and suddenly we're going to have I feel like hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses around cemeteries or something.
You gotta have somebody to manage it, and we're just dumping so much all the time on Parks and Rec that, poor Scott Hauser back there.
I thought you meant money.
No, we just got, every time we turn around, we're dumping another burden on Scott Hauser. It's probably somebody who's gonna work through his department, but we gotta take the burden of managing cemeteries away from Parks and Rec.
Well, maybe this could be just an agenda item, but we've talked about cemeteries a bunch of times and I still don't know what we should do. So
Okay.
maybe not tonight.
Rocket?
This is a very out of the box thought, almost on par with cops on horses. But this is Vermont, and green burials are a growing practice. To a certain extent, how much of the cemetery is used, mowed, maintained, at what cost in perpetuity? I don't know. And I mean no disrespect to anyone or who's dead or who has a loved one in the cemetery, but I do think maybe there are out of the box possible solutions that we could also consider. If you look at this as a line item, it's a lot of money that adds up. So that's one. The other is, Kim, I understand the anxiety of, well, one day it's going to creep up on us and be a big expense. It's that same fear that we would have about all the capital improvement projects that we have that would then get us to start saving reserves. And I think that we can still address that by just having a better cohesive master plan on what those expenditures are going to be over time. And then just every year as we tax, we spend.
Okay.
What I would recommend that we do, Scott, come on up.
Just wanted to clarify as far as the cemeteries go and potential operations. You do have that cemetery report that was done a few years ago by the commission, the committee that was charged to present that. And that's got some valuable information in there about estimated costs and capital stuff as well as operational stuff. So I certainly encourage you to go back and read that and kind of review what the ask is for the potential future. I think would be helpful to you as you start planning for a sexton that, is gonna come and operate, town cemeteries. Parks and Recreation, just to clarify too, we do maintain as best we can the non-active cemeteries. So we're not involved in the active part of them, even Christian Street right now. I mean, it's a contracted mowing service, and town manager's office is kind of managing burials and that kind of stuff out of there. So just wanted to make sure that was.
Yeah, Lanny might have.
Yeah, I want to speak on cemeteries for just a minute. So a lot of us remember when the Rollies used to be doing mowing, okay? And yeah, they did it on the cheap for us and it was great help. But what people don't realize is that there was not a lot of care given sometimes, and a lot of stones took a lot of abuse. So when we're looking at operators to do cemetery work, we're looking for somebody who takes a little bit more pride and more care. No offense to people in Parks and Rec, but they're mowing fields, okay? We're talking about people that are mowing around stones, and you can chip up stones pretty easily. So we're gonna be looking at, I don't know what you want to call it, specialty care. But
There's standards, right?
Yeah, there are certain standards we have to maintain.
Even though we mow fields,
right,
we do those standards.
Yeah.
Parks with trees, there's standards of how you maintain.
Oh, I understand. I'm not trying to degrade your crew whatsoever, but I'm saying that there's a lot more time and finesse that's involved with cemetery work than, a tree could get barked up and it'll heal. Okay, you bark up you bark up a cemetery stone and knock it over. That's a costly thing, so those are kind of things that we have to look at for future when we talk about cemeteries. Is it's not just as easy as putting Joe Schmo out there on a Husqvarna, mower to mow.
No, all right, we're gonna take a break now for 5 or 10, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna spend a little bit of time going through some of these expenses that are new to the budget. Then we're gonna figure out what we want John and Gail to run for us, numbers wise, because this is the first of many meetings and there's no reason why we or they should be here too late. So I will see y'all back here 5 or 6.
Thank you.
We're back. It's 10:08. I think we've made some progress on the unassigned fund, on the lot items, all things that John and Gail will help them bring us the next iteration of the budget. If we want, I would say we can look at some of the expenses that have been added here, whether we still want to keep them in. If there's anything that we're like, nah, it's not worth it. I would say that, you know, we could just decide to
So
pull it out. Yep.
right off the bat, I appreciate Chief Sheldon coming to us with his ask for 4 people.
Yep.
But I still maintain that we have a community safety review that's gonna be out there.
Yeah.
We need to learn from that community safety review, I think, before we start adding people onto the roster, because we don't even know what we're looking for folks. I don't see the need for us to hire 4 people right now when we don't even know what we need within the community.
Okay, what are
That's-
people's
that's
thoughts
my-
on that?
That's my biggest concern.
Because that would be a budgeted expense for 4, basically 4 FTEs, right? So, Ally?
I mean, my thought with it, I hear that, Lanny, that was actually one of, sorry, different item, but why I'm not necessarily for prioritizing the HPD station study right now, but to the community resource liaisons. And also the crime data analysis analyst, I do think that those could be helpful based off of the information that we do have. And also, again, trusting the expertise of Chief Sheldon and the department thus far and the need that they're seeing and have been seeing. I think that Chief Caston spoke to this as well, that there's a need for different kinds of police response and resources based on what those needs are. I would be supportive of considering, I think Chief Sheldon proposed 4 community resource liaisons. Maybe we start with 2 to see how it goes. And then that in tandem with information we learned from the community safety review could help us determine whether to continue moving in that direction or elsewhere. That would be what I would propose.
He said there's grants out there for 2.
For 2 community resource liaisons?
Yeah.
I don't
I
remember
think I remember him saying
that.
Is he online?
I asked, he told me that he might be online because he's not feeling very well. He couldn't come in.
Yep. Chief, you want to weigh in?
Can you hear me? The grant we were working on is looking like it's going to be better served, or we have a better chance of getting the grant if we look at a data crime analyst funding instead of these community resource liaisons. Really, the whole premise of community outreach, coalition building, and community response, non-law enforcement community response, all relies on data crime analytical work, and the needs are identified. We all know the basic needs that have been identified. The community assessment will identify some other gaps, but the data crime analyst will put all that together in a product that we can understand and utilize. So I'm being, or it's been suggested to me by some of the experts that, we need to have a data crime analyst to start with, just to get things rolling so we know what to do or where to put these individuals. I would like one on each shift. That's why I asked for 4. I obviously that's the future goals. If it's approved, that's great. If I get a data crime analyst and 1, I'm happy. I understand the tax burden that comes with this. The goal is hopefully to reduce some of that tax burden in the future with non-law enforcement response personnel. But for now, I understand the growing pains of the budget and asking for really 5 new people. So if I had a preference, I don't know if we're going to get the grant or not for the data crime analyst. So that's my catch. But if we do, then that would be salary savings if it was approved in the budget.
Okay. So the crime data analyst is the one you've identified kind of as the most important one?
For now, yes.
For now. Okay.
Moving forward, once the data crime analyst and the community assessment identifies gaps and needs and various other data points that we can look at and review, then yes, I mean, obviously the community resource liaisons is the emerging best practice across our country and across our state. So we need to be ahead of the curve a little bit, but I understand the growing pains of the budget for that. So this is what I would like in the future. Moving forward is 4, 1 on each shift, but I understand that that's not necessarily realistic.
And did you say 1 would be okay as we start sort of?
Yeah, I think 1 a data crime analyst and 1 response person is a start. As
Okay.
out last time I was there, Rutland has 3. They want more, but we all started out with 1 when I was there. And they grew the program over a year and a half. So yeah, 1 in a data crime analyst is would be really helpful to work with Carl Ebenhauser, the new lieutenant of outreach, and respond to some of these calls that really shouldn't have a police officer going on.
Okay. And if we went from 4 to 1, do we know what the cost is for each one? I mean,
I don't have my budget book. I
Well, it's
believe
375 for 4.
It was
Yeah, I
375
want 75,000 roughly per.
Okay.
for all.
So if we cut that to 1, we would.
We can certainly get the chief to get us that number and put it in the next draft.
But that'll, if my recollection serves, that also includes the grant. How much is that?
I don't know.
Does not include the grant.
375 includes.
Not for the grant for this guy, no.
So 375 for 5 salaries?
4 salaries.
4, I think, for the
For
community
liaison.
resource liaisons, and we can cut
And the
that.
data crime.
I think
Data
that
is separate.
is
Data was separate.
So 375.
so the priority, it sounds like, is keeping the data, the crime data analyst, and then reducing from 4 to 1 the community resource liaisons.
93.9, so 94,000 basically.
Yeah. For a community response person.
Right, 94,000.
So we'd go down to 94 roughly from, what was it,
375, and then we'd have whatever the data crime analyst.
375 down to 94. All right, does everyone feel like that's something we can agree on? Looking for getting a nod.
Yep.
Good.
So that's in addition to the budget, because it's not already in here.
So it's an addition.
Correct, so as it says, other issues wants to keep in mind. So the community nurse that's not in there, park, revisit funding for libraries, rugby, these are all items that are not currently.
In the numbers.
Right, so the libraries and the cemeteries are in, they're currently in there.
Yeah.
They're on here in case you would like to revisit a different funding source. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
What about the radios and the software that they want? Is that in the budget? The police department wants, they want software for cracking cell phones, and they want new radios for their.
I
not
believe
radios, but cameras.
that's in their budget. Yes,
So
it's
radios
been pared down a bit, but it's in their budget.
The cameras are there
So
as well, in-car cameras.
I would have to look at their budget.
That should be, yeah, it's in there. So anything that's listed here and the other issues want to keep in mind, with the exception of libraries and cemeteries, is not in the budget.
So any of the items that are here, those are all pluses.
Yeah.
We're never in the
Okay, so these are all pluses.
Right.
That does change our team. We've talked about Lyman for the lot, and then there's libraries and cemeteries are in there, but everything else here looks like it's an add-on.
That's right.
So
The dispatch console could be ARPA.
some of those could be ARPA, right? I mean,
Well, that's a question. One of the items that we've listed here for ARPA possibilities are the accessory dwelling units. So you'll want to make sure that you've factored that into your thinking, because I think we had 274,000 or so, Gail, in terms of uncommitted ARPA, and I think 150 had been asked by Planning Commission for accessory dwelling units. Right, and I don't know how the board has been disposed toward that proposal.
And we also have some interest on that for this.
Yeah, what is the interest on the ARPA?
It was 45.
Our memo says 46.
764 in interest. So that together with that, our fund, I think, 320.
I'm not sure if John did the interest part of it, I just have.
It was something that you sent
our
out a couple of weeks ago.
In our
Yeah.
second page of our packet, we have in the revenue section that's broken down, so it says uncommitted ARPA funds of 270,000 principal and 46,000 interest, 321,000 approximate.
Right.
That's what I said.
It's a Gale memo from November 17th.
I think that 40,000.
It was close, 47. It's
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
40,000 is not an accurate amount.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait, so this, I'm confused.
So what is an accurate amount of interest?
Less.
Yeah.
Less than that.
and I'm guessing you're gonna spend it in the
Yeah.
next year, so you probably have maybe 1,000 to maybe 3,000 in interest.
So we should really.
It's only $270,000. It's not as though it's a lot.
Okay, I'm just looking at your memo from November 17th, which said there's 274,447 of the original amount received has not been obligated, in addition to 45,000 gained from interest. So maybe what you're saying is 274,000 includes?
That's correct.
Okay, that's my mistake.
Oh,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
all right, so we have.
I mean, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I feels like, I wonder if we can, I know it's laborious, but I think we have to be, it's like, before we start deciding where things can be going and funding what is like, actually, which of these potential additions are priorities, right?
Yeah.
And we haven't quite done that fully, so I'd love to, if we could have an initial discussion about that. I know now I feel bad about proposing adding some more things, but I know I had mentioned select board compensation, committee compensation, and childcare dependent for select board members at the last meeting. I would be interested in that being part of a discussion as well. So anyway, but just holistically looking at what are the priorities to add, and then we go from there.
Okay, do you guys want to do that? We'll just look at these other issues, what to keep in mind, or wants to keep in mind, and we'll see if there's some we're okay with just not pursuing it this time. So community nurse, 150. I wonder with the safety review happening, I mean, is this one of those things that can be linked to that? Like if they, right, like after we get the review back, maybe we know more about the role of a community nurse or not?
I had a preliminary conversation with Scott Cooney and the Hanover town manager. And I don't want to overcommit at all, but in that preliminary conversation, he said that who knows, maybe there's ways that our towns could work together. He has a program in place and he's advertising now for a part-time additional person. But who knows if there might be a way to perhaps share a person like that.
This 150 is full-time?
That's full-time, yeah.
Ellie, do you have another?
Oh, I lost it, so I'll come back to it. Yes,
Yeah,
I got
go
it. Okay. I would be in favor of, because yes, we'll have the community safety review, and have learnings from that. And at the same time, ideally want to have funding in place to be able to activate those learnings. And again, I felt the community nurse presentation was really, really compelling. I 100% feel like it would be useful and supportive, and I've heard that feedback from others in the community so far. So I would be in favor of prioritizing that for sure.
I agree.
Thoughts from the other folks on the community nurse? Rocket?
I personally think a community nurse is a great idea. I actually really like the general direction that we're moving with both public safety departments. Just feels like we're moving forward thinking in our town. My one reservation about the community nurse is what if something comes up in the community safety review or partnership across river, or what, I mean, do we obligate ourselves to something long-term? How do we change course mid-flight if we
Salary
commit ourselves to
savings.
that? Salary
Salary
savings.
savings, right?
You know, if we activate this, we'll hire someone for it. And
This
then
for
feel like,
25, and the safety review will be complete before fiscal year 25 starts.
Sure. So we encumber and then we change our minds, basically. Yeah, that's possible. I'm fine with that. I think overall, I think it's just good for us to be forward thinking. I mean, so this feels that way, but it does feel also like every position we create, it's very hard for us to sit here and say, oh, let's start deleting positions out of departments, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's, and there might be a natural expiry in the sense of if people retire out of those roles and then we never fill them again, there might be that. But beyond that, it's very tough for us to sit here and say, oh yeah, that person's great, but we just don't think we need that person anymore, right? Or that role anymore. It just emotionally puts us in a the select board and the leadership of a town in a very tough position, which is not to say that we won't do it, but I do want to just be careful when we think through all of these positions, which are new and forward thinking, that we also kind of consider that.
Good.
Gail, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had like over $32,000 encumbered from that wellness coordinator position. Could we apply that to the community nurse position?
Would it be a contracted position?
Scott, I think it would be. Oh, wait.
What's that?
But if a community nurse is a contracted position, not a staff position, right?
I think you have lots of options.
Yeah.
What I presented in the budget presentation was a
Full-time,
a new FTE. There's different iterations of how you could apply that. Could it be a contracted service? I'm sure we could advertise it and see what that is. I don't know what the impact of that would be. And hearing some of the presentations from Katie that day, you know, if we did a 20-hour, we contracted for 20 hours a week. I don't know. I can't project what the impact to the community would be. It's a shot in the dark without real data to support it.
So would it have to be a contracted position for those funds to be used?
We could, well, you're not supposed to encumber salary funding, so if it was going to be an individual who would be a contractor, that's under contracted service. So if the sitting town manager would like to repurpose another line to utilize the funding to pay for the position, then that would be a decision that they would be able to make.
Yeah, well, obviously, how it gets there is not, I mean, like, we could unencumber that $32,000, put it to the other side.
Right,
Yeah.
so you don't unencumber it, but I just.
Yeah. Anyway, there's
say that is very
$32,682.54 that has been encumbered for that community wellness coordinator position that I won't go into detail now, but can, if anyone is.
What was the amount?
$32,682.54. So I like to, anyway, I am in support of community nurse at the requested amount, and then if there's ways that we can use this to offset it.
I counted a majority for community nurse, so I got that as in.
I'm supportive as well.
Yeah.
Can we move it to contracted service? And try
Well,
it?
it's not in there at all yet. So
No, I understand. I guess when we put it in, my proposal would be that we suggest it as a contracted service. So we don't just say, oh, the pool looks so inviting, let's jump in, but rather we can kind of do this in a graduated fashion.
I mean, it could evolve to a permanent position.
I mean, that might determine the amount of interests. There might be more interest for the staff position with good benefits as opposed to a contracted position where lots of people are dealing with things like travel nurses. It's hard to come up with people willing to do gigs on a short-term basis.
Ally?
Yeah, I mean, I could see contracted services being okay. I could also imagine this kind of role being very demanding and wanting to set someone up for success with other things like benefits and other cushions built in that contracted services you don't necessarily get. I feel really strongly that it be a full-time position, but open to,
Mary?
John, when you were talking to Hanover, were they advertising it as a staff or as a contracted person, or they hadn't even talked?
They sent me the job description / advertisement, and I didn't get much further than to see that it was for part-time, which led me to wonder about sharing somebody.
Okay.
But I would have to pull it.
Okay.
All right, so community nurse is in.
Can I make a quick comment too, please? Sorry, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
go ahead, man.
So I know that Thetford and Norwich are also are advertising for part-time community nurses. So it might be a good role if 4 towns each committed to 10 hours a week, that then they could, provide some benefits as well and would have a full-time person. And as that position could enlarge or decrease in certain times, that person could be absorbed specifically into one town, but it might serve the Upper Valley, small Upper Valley here very well. So that someone would have some benefits, and the travel area would not be huge for them, but it would benefit, a 4-town area or something. So it might be something to explore with, as I said, Thetford, Norwich. We've done things like that in the past with like the energy coordinator. So that model is in place, and I think it's been successful. So I think we should explore it some more.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I mean, it seems like there could be some creative solutions involving local communities on this one. For now, community nurse is in. Gail?
And what amount?
150.
I could go lower. We just have a lot to.
We're just running numbers.
We have so many things to negotiate, and we've heard a lot of different. Chief Cooney said there's ways that we can consider creatively. We've just heard what Dan said. We've heard what the town manager said. I think there's a lot of ways that this does not need to be, like, the first step does not need to be a gigantic step, but it can be a first step nonetheless.
Yeah,
it may just be that in 2 years from now, we have an entire department for community nurses, which would be preventative healthcare, and great. But I just think we should be judicious and cautious of, we've gone through so much transition as a town. I think just being moderated in our steps forward, not holding steps back, but just being careful as we go. My vote would be for 75,000 for a part-time equivalent.
I'd see if we knew that there was going to be sharing of a person between towns, I'd be fine with that. But since, at this point, we don't know if there's going to be sharing or anything. And if we want to, have a position that pays well enough to actually get someone to come do it, I would keep it at 150 at this point. It's our estimate, and then just realize there may be other areas we need to trim.
I have just suggested to take out 5,000.
From what, Sister Cities? Yes, we'll take 5,000 out from Sister Cities. Everybody give her that. Okay.
Because there was no clear, I don't remember them having a.
There.
Can we point of order?
Yeah, go ahead, Gail.
Yeah, can we kind of like go in order and?
Yeah.
Oh.
Community nurses in for 150. I think we have a majority on that.
Thank you.
Lyman Point Park is in. We're gonna talk about lot for that. Anybody want to revisit the funding source for libraries or cemeteries? I don't see anyone all excited about that. Yeah, right?
Well, my vote for cemeteries is no funding source.
Okay.
No, you can't do that. Or you can't do that.
I don't know that would have support.
Well,
Why, Rob?
reduced.
What would you reduce it to?
I don't know, but I mean, does it seem sustainable or
But
reasonable?
we're not talking about the reserve.
Oh, okay.
We're
well,
just talking about what's in the
the
budget.
current operating?
Their
Yeah.
requests, yeah, sorry.
Okay, well, certainly none of the reserves, but even with the operating, I just feel like we gotta get creative here, right? I mean,
You're gonna go out there with more.
no, but,
All right then.
well, okay, so that would be a pretty uncreative solution then in my.
We've got some statutory
Mike.
obligations, so let's.
Yeah, I know,
Yes.
part of it
Like,
is. Part
while-
of it is
while
I'm
that.
just saying it's a big obligation, right? And
It is a big obligation.
what is the utilization of the cemeteries beyond?
In Norwich, my whole family's buried there. I go look at their graves.
Yeah, I
You know,
understand, but
People care about that stuff.
I'm not saying that we don't care about it. I'm just saying that it is a big obligation and perhaps we should have a difficult conversation about.
I agree,
We're
tackling
gonna flag that.
cemeteries.
We flag that it's gonna be on an upcoming agenda.
Yeah, I think the
Okay, fine.
cemeteries topic is
So
a
maybe-
big one, and so we
Okay.
can talk about that, but for now,
As is.
I don't see majority support to defund our cemeteries. Our next item is policy digitization, which is a 5,000 per each quarry. One thing about that is, I thought that was somewhat linked with adopting the policy on policies, which we didn't really, well, I mean, we told John to sort of look at the policies.
And
right?
my plan is to come before you, say on a lighter agenda night, maybe the 26th of December,
Yeah,
because I do have lots of inputs I'd like to share with you.
okay,
And in fact, a quote from our current website vendor who does this kind of work. So
okay. So do we need the 5,000?
I
Got a yes from Kim, Ellie, and then
the
Rocket.
quote's going to be for 10 for an
Okay.
initial digitization. and then a $3,000 annual maintenance. But I don't want to get too far ahead of us.
Yeah. So we'll be looking for like 13 this year,
If that's the way you want to
if
go.
that's where we want to go. Thoughts on this,
Fiscal
everyone?
24.
As soon as you want it. I'm told by Dylan it could be as much as an 18-month process to do this project.
So,
got that right, Dylan?
Rocket, unless Sally was
Oh,
coming
just
first,
that I would be supportive of it, that's all.
at the $5,000.
I mean, I'm guessing if it happens in fiscal 24, there'll be funds found to do it if you want to do it.
Yeah, I know, a budget's not law, it's a plan.
Yeah, exactly. And then 5,000 would be enough to cover the annual cost.
We have a majority for the 5,000 each. Corey, Rocket?
Just comments.
Yeah.
Like I said in the conversation policy and policies, I think that there is real room for improvement in terms of standardizing our documentation. I think that we should be careful not to overdo it where, you know, there's just limitlessly requiring people to standardize policies and procedures. I also would love to know what $3,000 of maintenance of scanned documents looks like, right? Because to me, it sounds like nothing, right? But it's maybe it's memory space, storage space, cloud space, something like that. But if
There's a
this,
16-page document coming your way, and maybe that describes
I
what
would
they do.
gladly review that, but it seems like an expensive contracted service, and I'm not really sure what problem that solves for the citizenry. I do think that I like that where we started with, which is we should be standardizing our policies and making sure that the committees are, what's happening here is super clear to the citizens. I think that's a good start. And then I think we just take it from there. As we find problems, we find solutions. But otherwise, we're just kind of like signing up for, like, we're gonna go to the basement and get everything scanned. I mean, does that solve any real pain point right now? Not super sure.
I think that's an argument that can go either way. Lanny?
The only concern I had, and I raised it before, I'm gonna raise it again, is that we need to go into this with a plan, because if we don't go into this with a plan, it's gonna seem that we're just targeting one area. And we need to start with priority being at the top, because leadership leads from the front. And if we're gonna do this, we need to work from our own policy and procedure and work down, because we can't go at this from a process of just looking at what each query is presenting, because it's going to come across as the optics of it are going to be looking like we're focusing on just the racial equity part of it, and that's bad optics. Whereas if we look at leading from the front and putting ourselves out there first, we'd be better off.
Allie?
I mean, I have thoughts about it being bad optics. I think it's actually good optics, but that's another conversation. It sounds like we're going to get an update from you, John, about that, where the need or not will be expressed, but, you know, process funding, all those things. So I'd be in favor of at least just having something earmarked for now, and then we can adjust once we hear more from you.
We have a majority in favor of that reasonable position.
Tabling
For how much?
John's presentation.
Just putting it on
You're
right
right,
now for
5,000.
5,000, and then we'll hear an update from John before the end of the year about it.
Counter proposal, we leave it off for now until we hear the proposal, and then if we find it reasonable, we update to 13 or whatever.
I think I've got 4 in favor of putting it in now.
Yeah, I'd rather, like, even though I know these numbers are staggering, I'd rather go big at first, especially because we're gonna direct folks to run the numbers on things, and then we can cut from there. Would be mine.
Okay, 5,000 digitization is in. Bugby Center, I don't see any. What is the Bugby Center number?
You're going to be hearing from the design architect firm probably on January 9th, after they meet with the Bugby board and Mark. And at that point, we will, I guess, be learning about cost estimates. Gail, is that that's what I'm expecting. So it's just a placeholder to be prepared to hear some numbers, and whether you want to act immediately on those proposals or those assessments or not is up to you entirely.
Okay.
I just wanted to get it on your radar.
We'll get an update on that, but we may not actually include anything in this budget. So that sounds like. Okay.
Mr.
Yep.
Question,
Rocket?
Mr. Town Manager. Does Bugby Senior Doors have power doors on it, the handicap?
Not yet.
I think that was part of the, or the genesis of the study.
Right, so my concern is that a year and a half ago, we had citizens, senior citizens who used the Bugby Center come in and ask us for support getting the power doors.
Right.
A year and a half out now, we still don't have the doors. I understand that a renovation of that building is going to solve that as part of a bigger problem. But the initial problem for which there was and remains a Band-Aid towards has not been resolved, so that the senior citizens who are using that space are not being adequately served. The specific concern that they came in and addressed with had nothing to do with the heat, had nothing to do with some of these other things that are within the scope of this next project. But their specific item of concern was something that they came and appealed to us for support on. I don't think a 3-year answer to their concern is reasonable, no less for a senior center. That's something that I would like to bring to the board as something that is troubling for me, and I would like to see motion on.
Maybe there's an opportunity on this January 9th presentation to inquire whether it would be cost effective to deal with that issue separately or as part of a larger upgrade to the building. That might be a good discussion to have.
Yeah, and I guess maybe if you can communicate in your conversations with the Bugby team,
Yes.
that for me separated out as a specific line item for what that cost would be. Because I have inquired myself and seen numbers. And I think that that's something that I personally would be willing to consider insofar as the seniors who are actively using this space, which is not being closed off in the period of renovation, but actively used, can also benefit from the service and the relief that they sought a year and a half ago.
Lenny, and then to Gail.
One of the things that we have to look at with Bugby Senior Center, it's not just a matter of slapping in a set of handicap doors. In order to put handicap doors in, you have to widen out the frame of the door, which means the vestibule has to be opened up. You can't just slap a set of doors in there, which means if you're going to open up the vestibule, you have to redesign the building.
That's
all right. You can't, you can't, they've looked into it. They've done the estimates on it. You can't just slap a set of doors into that without revamping
With all due respect, that's incorrect. You can put an actuator with a button on it.
Okay, guys, we have a update on this. Gail, did you want to add something?
I just wanted, Lanny actually is correct based on the conversations that we've had with the structure, with the engineer.
Thank you.
But I also wanted to just say that the board made the decision to pause on fixing the doors because it is a bigger picture. So it came in as $2,500, and by the time that meeting ended, the board committed $80,000 to have an assessment done. So I understand that it's unfortunate for the users of the facility. However, I just want to make sure that it's clear that it's not anybody on staff that is responsible for that decision.
Of course, I want to be really clear that I'm not pointing my finger at anyone in that, because I remember those meetings viscerally. I think that that was maybe an error on the part of the board and in tandem with staff, because I understand that if you need to make the vestibule handicap accessible, then you need to renovate the vestibule. But if you just want a door with a power, I mean, you can do it on a mouse door. You can do it on a doghouse door. You can do it on a door of any size. But the pain point in question was that they were having trouble accessing the building in and out. So if there is even, for example, in our consideration of Bugby, the opportunity to simply consider one line item, a smaller line item, to solve that problem while we get the architectural study done, while we get the engineering study done, while we get the rest of the renovation done, but so that that pain point can be solved, I think it's the right thing to do by the seniors to just try to make that building more accessible, even though it may still remain inaccessible from a handicap accessibility standpoint.
All right, well, we're gonna get a report on it and we can ask those questions when that comes up. So climate action request of $5,000. We want to add it for our next estimated cost.
Do we know what's in the reserve currently? This is for reserve, right?
Or was it for cast?
Well, I
I think
think
you're asking for it to be deposited into the reserve. I was a little bit confused with the presentation, and I was hoping that one of you had a better understanding. I walked away thinking that they wanted a $5,000 deposit.
In the reserve.
In the reserve.
But that's not, we've not completed this with the Conservation Commission.
No, that was 3,000.
Okay.
I have in my notes that actually that the 5,000 is actually different from a proposed 20,000 annual deposit into climate action reserve. And then I think the 5,000 is related to funding support for the climate action steering team.
Maybe we get some more info from,
Yeah, I didn't hear 20,000 at all, but.
It was a little bit of a confusing conversation.
let's get some more info, but put the number in there for now.
Was that John Reed who was presenting?
John Reed and
Yeah.
Dana.
Yeah.
Dana, okay.
So put 5,000.
I put the 5 in, and then we need some more clarification on what it's exactly for. But if we're gonna be estimating, it's probably good to err on the side of including the 5,000. Tree warden budget. Do we want to increase it from 15,000, I'm sorry, to 17,500?
Yeah, so you remember Jeff Arnold took exception to us reducing it, thinking at first that it was his stipend that was
Yeah,
going.
but it
when
doesn't
was
reduce
not.
his stipend.
And I will
thought
point
there
out
was-
that the
yeah.
highway department has funded that item for the first time in several years, tree removal. So
Yeah, it
between
sounded
the,
like there was money coming in for the trees.
Yeah.
And
so that's really a question.
$2,500 isn't a whole lot, but hey.
So it doesn't sound like we need to fund it though, because the funding's there from highway.
That's a decision for you to make.
Well, the trees are, that's for contractual.
Yeah,
For us
so-
to cut trees down.
Oh, it's not for like.
So there's an overall need for tree removal.
I
It's
think
a matter of who does it and to what extent, for what purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we funded 17,500.
I agree.
Yeah.
I would fund it at 15.
Well, look at you.
Got a bunch of cuts here,
Alright.
but it sounds like, I imagine the majority would fund it at 17. So let's do 17.5 for the tree warden.
Let's do it and see what
Going
comes of
once,
it.
going twice.
All right, now we've got a bunch of, okay, so now we're getting into some of the police stuff. Dispatch console.
I see that as a need.
Yeah, I mean, it's
No, I see that as a
expensive.
need. I mean,
but-
Yeah.
I think that's a need, not a want. I think that's a need.
Gail?
It's Chief Sheldon is still on. I think that when he did his presentation, he'd be willing to fund that over a couple years.
Oh,
He didn't
okay.
want to do it all at once. One of his requests that he had was to increase his reserve amount, so if you don't have the appetite to fund it all right now, consider increasing his deposit amount to make that happen.
His hand is up.
Yep, chief, if you have thoughts on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, Gail is 100% correct. We have 20,000 going in reserves. The initial request was to increase the reserves to 50,000 so that in 3 years we could add that 4th terminal. So that's just it's not a current desperate need, but it will be a need in the future.
So
And it is
we could,
currently budgeted for 50 in reserve.
okay, so we're already at 50 in reserve.
That's what we got in the budget, book, so we don't have to add that on top. 10, 9, 21, 271, 100.
He was asking for an extra 50, so over the course of 3 years, 50 each year, we can afford the new console.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Wait a second.
I just, yeah, it's in here.
Is it on the?
Yeah, it has
information?
increased from 20 to 50.
No, page 62.
Top of the page.
Because if it's acceptable that we add a little more to the reserves for the idea of getting the new console in 2 or 3
Oh, that's-
years, I think that makes sense.
Capital dispatch.
Capital dispatch,
Yeah.
yeah. Towards funding 4th console 3 next year.
Okay, so that,
So what's it budgeted at? What would we need to add to this?
You would need to add in.
Nothing, we're good
Yeah, correct.
with the budget? Okay, because we have the reserve of 50.
Correct.
All right, so then we won't include the dispatch console.
What you are doing is you're approving the increase in the reserve amount to fund the dispatch console in 3 years.
Right.
Right, thank you for clarifying that.
And Mr. Chair, to that note, I repeat my concern about the process by which we do reserves and capital purchase.
even for specific product,
Yeah, I mean, I think we do it townwide. What are these big ticket item purchases that we need? And then if we can like get a nice map of 5-10 year map, then every year, instead of allocating a certain amount to reserves that gets fractured amongst 50 different items, let's
no,
say.
this is for the specific item.
No, I understand. So I understand that exactly. So what we're doing right now with everything across departments is we say, well, this department is going to need these different purchases. So we start saving in reserves for each of those different items, right? And they all have different timelines. Then what we do, you add that up, we've now put money aside in 50 different little reserve accounts or earmarks. Instead of doing that, because then that money sits year over year for many years until we actually make the purchase, depending on what the item. We just take that same amount that we're putting into reserve and we actually spend it on the big ticket items of that year. So every year you kind of have a map over time, like, we would, the reason why we should fund this reserve account is in case that we don't do that, we will have the money when it's ready for it. But I think the smarter, more fiscally prudent thing is to just have a big picture idea of what the townwide capital purchases are.
Capital plan.
Exactly. So that's my point. It's not something we can solve now. I will support putting it in reserve, but I do think that we should really reimagine it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, we're getting close. If we can get through these wants and needs, I think we should tonight, otherwise it doesn't do Gail or John a whole lot of good, then we can get out of here.
And there's also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. So the dispatch console, we're putting to the reserves. So let's try and make our way through the rest of this. The station study, $60,000 to $70,000. I like
That doesn't feel like a priority to me at this time. I think I already shared some reasons, but open to hearing other thoughts.
Anyone else?
I almost, you're a shudder here. I agree with Ally. I shudder to say this, but I agree with Ally.
I think we all know at some point in the future, there's probably going
Almost amazed to hear me saying this.
For fire and police, right? I mean, I guess the question is just whether we want to do this study, get the money for the study now. I don't mind if we don't put it in. What are the thoughts of the board?
I agree.
Everyone's okay. All right. So no HPD station study.
And Chief Shelton's hand is, I don't know if it's still up or up again, Chief.
Of course, he wants to advocate for it.
Oh, he put it down.
That was accidental.
Okay. HPD cruiser, 75,000 each.
So that is also a reserve.
Yeah, again, that's something that I don't think we have much of an option on because we got to keep vehicles on the road, but I would say one, though, not two.
What do we have, two right now?
Well, he said he wanted two to have on hand for extra. Whereas if we just had one instead, he wanted one to be a reserve cruiser. I mean, two to be reserve cruisers. Sorry. And then
Chief, any thoughts?
I think I lowered my original budget request down to one cruiser.
One cruiser?
One, okay.
That's the operating budget.
With one?
You were talking just now about reserves.
Well, there's 50,000 in reserve, 30,000 of it which toward cruiser replacement in 3 years. 10, 9, 21, 2, 11,
Yes.
0, 1, 1.
Yeah.
Okay. So one cruiser, right?
Can I ask a question of you, Chief Sheldon?
Sure.
So currently, right now, how many cruisers do you have that are operational?
We have 6 line cars. When I'm referring to cruisers, I refer to patrol cars that are marked up and available for patrol. So we have 6.
So 6 line cars, okay. And at any, I don't know if I could ask this question or not, but I need to ask this. No, I guess I'm not going to ask the question because it would disclose too much. So do we? Let me just ask this: do we have a need for 6 vehicles all the time?
Right now, I would say we could probably lower that down, but with the outreach division, it goes back up. So the outreach division will be taking one of those vehicles and using it. So we're really lowering our patrol fleet to 5. And when we have 4 on a shift, that gives us 1 car for overtime and for highway safety type stuff.
So the vehicle that you're looking for, is it just to have a vehicle in reserve in case or you need it, or cut down on mileages, or
it's really a replacement for mileage, and we'll take a high mileage vehicle and either repurpose it for administrative work, outreach work, or to sell, trade in. So really, it's just any new vehicle gets purchased gets assigned to the patrol division, and one of those other cruisers with high mileage gets removed. Currently, the lead time on cruisers is better than a year. Same problems that Chief Cooney's having with ambulances, we're having with cruisers. And it's not just us, it's everybody. So it's really comes down to if we get a cruiser in the budget and we can order it next July, we probably won't get it until sometime in 2025.
So within the budget, is there one cruiser? One, there's one within, okay.
Yeah.
There's
Is it-
one in the operating budget, and then there's one in the reserve. Is that correct, Dale?
Toward one in the reserve.
I don't know what you meant, both.
Last I heard is one cruiser.
Question is, how many additionals beyond that?
Where is it? There's one cruiser on there, page 18, 10 to 11, 331.
And then,
Yeah, it went from 3 to 1.
so one is already in the.
So
okay.
one's in there. So
And-
we want to
and
add
then
the
one-
second one.
And we're doing reserves for another.
The reserves
Okay.
for another's already in there.
For after 3 years, there's $30,000 a year for 3 years.
Right.
So we don't
What
necessarily-
page? Yeah,
Page 18. Second row from the bottom, 211, 331.
okay.
So we've got one cruiser in there. We got reserves for another cruiser, right? And the question is, do we want to add 75 for an additional cruiser?
No.
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 Nope.
Sorry. that's-
Oh, yeah.
Wait,
He's good. He went down from. 3
Oh, okay, so we're good. Okay. Let's move along then. So I think we talked about one community resource liaison at roughly 94,000. And that the chief identified the crime data analyst as a priority.
Yep.
But we don't know how much.
And what's the
for the-
cost on that?
Do we know what the cost is on the crime data analyst?
Approximately the same cost.
Okay,
90, so 90
so
something.
90 something, 94.
Yeah, that's with
Okay.
the fringe benefits and everything.
Yep. Okay, I would say put both those in. The incident response trailer.
No,
I don't remember the, you say no,
I don't think, no,
maybe not this year.
not this
Yeah,
year.
what are your thoughts, chief, on the incident response trailer if we were to punt that for a year?
Low priority, absolutely.
Low priority, okay, and then how about the impound area?
That is a growing problem. I would say we could probably hold off if we had to.
Is that just where you're like towing cars, where people get arrested?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, and part of the problem is we don't have space. We don't know where we put that.
but I imagine, right, like an impound, I don't know, at some point, we're gonna be talking about like redoing like public safety, right, like a bond, right?
Well, and if we do the storage building. behind
Yeah.
the-
If we do storage building, there's open up some space up there to put, from,
Yeah,
we also got to look long range and, possibly what we're going to do down in the landfill area.
yeah,
That's
that's
gonna-
true. All right, so I'm getting the sense incident response trailer and impound area aren't like must-have priorities.
Nope, no.
Okay, ambulance, that's gonna be under the lot, right?
Yeah, we're not finished with police yet, though.
What else?
Well, I wanted to talk to the board, I guess, about the cameras, they want to update the camera systems.
Uh-huh.
And the
Was that
problem
their
is,
budget or was it part of IT?
oh, that was in their budget. Yeah, in the in-car
Is it
cameras.
the Axon?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's there.
That was all in the budget, and it seems like a costly expense. And I realized that I'm an advocate for police, but this is something that gets labeled as officer safety immediately. And when you look at officer safety, your heart goes out to the officers, and I understand that this is an emotional thing, but I think we're doing fine with what we have now, and it seems like a lot of cost to ask right now for what we're going to get from it.
What's the amount?
The line item,
10 to 11, 318, I presume?
So this is a motion essentially to strike that budgeted expense.
Yes,
Okay.
Because the.
not a motion, but a
Well,
suggestion.
yeah.
Suggestion.
I don't know what it's called.
Is it the Axion, you think?
It's
Because
Axion.
that and the Celebrate, and maybe Chief Sheldon can, he's got his hand up again. The Celebrate
Chief,
and the
whenever.
Axion do not show up listed specifically in there anymore.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. I don't know where. Oh, wait a minute. 10 to 11, 314.
Oh, yeah, there's
Celebrate
Celebrate.
is in there, but Axon is not. Axion.
Chief, if you have any thoughts on this, just
Yeah, the body cameras are more than just officer safety. I wish they were just that. The data storage fees, the replacement costs of these things is astronomical. A contract of this sort is over the course of 10 years is going to save, I can't even tell you how much now. I don't have the number in front of me, but you're looking at saving several, I want to say close to $100,000 in 10 years. Because this is what's required now for court. This is what's required for officer complaints and litigation against officers. So it's a liability issue for the town. These cameras need to be updated. These cameras need to be constantly refreshed and downloaded. It's also an efficiency thing. When the officers pull into the station, it downloads automatically. Right now, that doesn't happen. The officers have to spend time doing it. They dock it in their station and they go to work at their desks, and if a call comes in and they forget their camera, we have a possible compromise of a criminal case or litigation down the road of an officer or a complaint comes in on an officer that something happened that didn't. This is probably one of my top priorities. If we don't take care of the people that are working there, adding more people to it doesn't make sense. So
what's the price tag? The price tag and what's the lifespan?
It's $33,000. But that provides free replacement cameras, I believe, every 3 years, which is a large expense. It also provides unlimited data storage and transfers. It also provides us with a tagging mechanism, which means all of our cases currently are being tagged automatically, all of our data videos, and being downloaded, which saves the officers hours and hours and hours.
So this to me is something that I would see ARPA funds going to fund because it's a one-time expense. I would.
Let me be clear. This is not a one-time expense. This would be a yearly expense.
A year, $33K a year.
Yeah, this is the wave of the future. I never thought I'd see this in my lifetime as a police officer, but without a camera, without a video, your case doesn't go anywhere in court anymore. Police officers' words aren't being taken as a legitimate and trustworthy. Defense is pushing, and prosecutors want a video showing everything that's happening.
How much were we putting to cameras in the past?
I couldn't get that number off the top of my head. I can look tomorrow when I get back to work. And there's several things here. One is the fact that this does provide us with a replacement, a full warranty on all these cameras. And it also provides us with unlimited data download and storage, as well as the data transfer and the tagging of information. You're talking, I can't tell you exactly how many man hours, but you're talking probably, I'm going to guess, 15, 20 man hours a week just in loading videos and tagging them for evidentiary purposes. Technology is scary expensive, but unfortunately it's the way things are going. And to be efficient when we're down 4 officers is the most critical component for officer well-being and resilience. So I'm looking at this from a lot of different angles, but really it comes down to court is the big one, and taking care of the cops that we have now.
Thanks, Chief. Kim?
Chief, what did you take out? You revised that 10, 211, 314 line from 60,000 down to 38,000. What came out of there, or was it just a?
Was that the Cellbrite? Was that the same line as Cellbrite?
Yeah.
Yeah, we minimized Cellbrite down to the lowest possible subscription.
Yes.
And then we got a grant. We were hoping for 10,000. We got a grant for 5,000. So
Cellbrite
is the download of the cell phones.
Yeah, that's a phone. Okay, that's a phone. Okay.
I would fully support the cameras with that. I'm happy with that sort of lower subscription to the Celebrate, because I was gonna also suggest that we knock that down. So anyway, I
didn't realize it was a $33,000 a year cost for cameras. That's what's staggering.
It's one of those unfortunate costs that are going to be necessary.
But where does that show up? Where are the cameras?
If it helps to understand, when I was buying these cameras, in the car systems in Rutland, they were over $5,000 a piece. To replace one, we have 6. So in the body cameras that the officers are wearing are very expensive and can get broken pretty readily on a call if you're wrestling or fighting with somebody. So the replacement warranty on these things is what you're really paying for in the data. The data is where they're making their money.
Is that the file on queue? Is that what that is, or what? File
on queue is our evidence storage, which actually talks to the camera systems and downloads evidentiary videos. It is all intertwined and linked together. File on queue is where we document our evidence and tracking of our evidence, and we're at a critical point now where we have 160 slots left in our evidence file on queue, and that's really just 2 major calls. So
And the evidence on queue, that's basically on the same lines.
yeah, file on queue is, again, it's all trying to get all of our technology to listen to each other and coordinate with each other behind the scenes so officers don't have to do it and then go back on the road. I can't overemphasize the amount of man hours we will be saving by doing all this. It's substantial.
Kim's question, where's the cameras that listed in the budget?
10-211-330-0000.
Page what?
18. Page 18, office equipment near the bottom of the page. Looks like that's
Okay,
evidence and storage,
Yes, I see
33,260.
yeah, I got you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, chief. We're getting close here. Station 2.
We're gonna look at bond, we gotta have bonding that. That's gonna have to be bonded.
Scott has
something we're gonna-
provided some numbers that we forwarded on to the select board. Maybe you want to speak to
Yeah,
those, Scott?
Scott, if you want to, you might be up here for a couple of these items. What was the, yeah, so station 2.
Yeah, so I think since we started this project and now, awarded the contract, the construction management contract, SC Gallup.
Yeah.
And done their piece, they've arrived at some numbers for the 2 projects, both individually and combined, so you have those numbers now. We reached out to our municipal leasing vendor just to get some ideas on payments and what those that cost.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're gonna put that amount to the voters and then the budget, you'll also need to add a payment, a bond payment into the budget. So you can make your first payment during that fiscal year. So I think that's where we're at. We get a decision on whether to fund both one or whatever, provide just some preliminary numbers on what that first bond payment or financing payment would be. I think it's, I don't have that front of me, but I think it's been emailed to you.
Yeah.
So it's around, 110,000, I think, for the fire station by itself, and the renovation is about 163 or something like that.
169.8,
For both
yeah.
projects, so that's over a 20-year financing time. And those
Okay.
numbers change depending on the firm.
And those rates are around 7%.
Yeah, that's from at least, I don't know what the bond bank, how they specifically operate and how, when those payments occur, Gail probably knows better than I, or even what the interest rate for the bond bank.
Yeah, the Vermont Bond Bank is actually getting together, not a comprehensive benchmark report like they have provided to us in the past, but they are providing us, I told them we needed it by the 12th. What our debt ceilings are, which they'll also include what the current rates are. And normally when we do take a bond out, the payment is not due the same year that you take the bond out, so that's
Okay.
usually a more helpful situation, and normally it's only interest the first payment that you make.
Would this be the only bond that we would be putting forth that as of now, like, you don't? Any of the DPW stuff that's already on the books doesn't need bonding, or does?
The one we had would be the Hartford water main, but we don't have that yet, so that's engineering, it's just starting now.
Okay, yeah,
So
yeah.
Probably get that this year, so we could be looking at 26.
Okay.
Year for that.
So, and Scott, you think, sorry, Mary.
Yeah.
You think you'll be ready for, like a bond to be presented to the voters this March?
Oh, yeah, we're ready. Estes and Gallup just reached out to me the other day, found it, wanting to know if we wanted to be on their spring schedule. I said, it's a little premature yet, I haven't got, the board hasn't put it on the ballot yet.
Okay.
But,
I definitely
they're looking to schedule in the spring.
be supportive of the station for this year and maybe the storage facility next year.
Lanny?
A question for Gail. What do we have? We have dropping off, we have bonds dropping off this year?
Mm.
Yes, Lanny.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we do. I would recommend all of you, if you have questions regarding that, review the email that I sent you that has all of the amortization schedules as well as the
What?
audit.
When did you do that?
a couple times.
And we're gonna discuss debt at the next meeting, correct?
I'm sorry, I tried to print this stuff out. I tried to find it and print it
I
out.
thought that's on the agenda for next
I
week's
thought you
select board
covered
meeting.
it in your presentation.
Yes, I did, but that's been put on my agenda as a placeholder, so I'm happy to delete it.
All right.
So wait, do you have it?
I mean, I can find it. I do remember seeing it.
You can just
But
search
I didn't
Gail's
think
name
there
in your
was-
email. It'll come up.
No, I searched for the Gale and I couldn't find it. That's,
And it was in the audit last week too.
November 8th.
Yeah,
Hartford debt.
November 7th, debt information.
I mean, I can't even read that first.
18th.
All right, so we do a bond, right?
November.
We're thinking about it.
And what's the amount again? I'm sorry.
Just the station 2.
110.
Like, there's a proposal for one amount is for station 2 and one is for station 2 and the storage building.
So the amount
So we
we're
need like an additional $60,000 a year for 20 years to do the storage building now with this prospective interest.
I have
rate.
it now,
Like,
thank you.
So, okay,
just-
what if we? well,
Sorry.
Just station 2 is 110.
Mhm.
I'd be
Yeah.
supportive of that.
You good? Just station 2?
Alec, can you just say?
Just station 2, not yet storage facility at 110,000 for the bond payment, just for station 2.
If the voters approve.
The voters approve the bond.
Yeah, and I think Gail just mentioned that if you choose to use the bond bank as your financing, so it's that first payment doesn't even have to happen, correct, Gail?
Yeah, and if there is one, depending on when it hits, it will only be for the interest portion. It's not interest and
Okay.
principal for the first payment.
So it's gonna be
That's good
less
to
than
know.
that.
So could we budget like 70,000 for the first year or something?
I haven't looked at what Scott provided and
Okay.
what the calculation is, and without talking to the bond bank and knowing. how the
Yeah.
amount-
But it sounds like we would be okay with the station 2.
But that'll be
Including that.
incorporated when we start looking at our tax rate and stuff, there'll be something in.
There will have to be something.
Okay, great.
Lanny?
Yeah, my question is, the equipment that we're looking to put under the equipment shed, how detrimental is that gonna be for equipment to be?
It's not detrimental, Lanny. I think it affects probably longevity of the equipment, because it's trailer storage. So
Right.
It's the mobile equipment trailers, and they sit outside seasonally year after year.
But it's not like it's salted over there.
No, in
So-
in fact, logistically, it becomes troublesome, because in the wintertime, when we move all the stuff down to the
Yeah.
wastewater plants, if there's immediate need, we've got to take crews away from responding to the emergency to send them to go get the equipment, instead of having them all at the main fire station, just hooking up and going.
So it sits in wastewater over the winter?
Yeah, it sits under their canopy at the wastewater treatment facility.
Oh, okay.
Okay, increased parking and public safety. Is that really, I mean,
So those items appeared in the CIP presentation to you. They've not been funded for many years.
yeah,
They're all site development ideas for the property, to include the impound yard, additional parking. I think parking is an issue with public safety. I think we
Yeah.
recognize that. Just depends on how we want to.
If and when the police department relocates.
Well, that changed the whole perspective, right?
Yeah.
We had that discussion. If a future bonding of a police facility, a little bit of a fire station in there too, maybe, happens, then, yeah, you probably wouldn't need as much expansion at the fire station that's on the cutoff road in that case.
okay. And the training building, it seems like some of these are,
But the training building piece is, if once you decided, if we could do some sort of renovation to the transfer facility or
Yeah.
revision that at some point, that's probably where you would want to do
Yeah.
that.
okay.
Which we should be getting that report pretty soon.
Right, I know Brian's been pestering them for it.
Yeah, we got in there, wanted some more comments on the feasibility studies, we first got that in. It's been over a week now, so we've got it done to get it back, finalize that report for us.
So something that'll come up for our consideration in the future. Housing position and planning department, any thoughts on that?
Is this the project, this
is the
yeah,
housing and
there's the
development.
new position in the budget.
Yes, and that's already in the budget.
It's just a
Okay.
typo, yeah.
Oh, this is not,
It's not the position, it's the ADU project.
Which is a
oh, yeah,
No.
Gail?
Yeah. That position, the housing position in the planning department is a new position that is already listed in the budget.
Yeah.
So it's a decision for the board whether or not we want to create that new position. But it
already
requested
included in
number,
the budget.
requested.
Okay. Town beautification, we're thinking
Wait a minute, we're gonna have a discussion about that?
about what?
The housing
The
thing.
position.
Whether you want it.
But we still haven't made the decision about the ADU project.
Yeah.
Point of
So that's
order.
not on this list.
Gail is saying that, so this is already, this item that is listed here is actually already included as a line item within the budget.
Right.
But it's listed here to bring our attention to the fact that it's a new position
Right.
for us to consider.
So it's not one where we say, yeah, put it in,
Right.
run the numbers.
But I do
It's in
think-
there already for the budget, like the
Sure.
estimates.
Yes, and I appreciate being made aware of that new position. I don't know if that's standardized across departments, but I guess that would be nice to know all the new positions that are being added in. Whether they're in the operating budget or whether we add them in. Sorry.
You read your budget.
No, I know, but when they're isolated like this versus when they're in the operating, in the already listed in. So I think that's kind of a nice classification for us to consider is my point, the designation.
Okay, Gail, and then we'll finish up our
Right,
last
so
two items.
historically, when new positions are added, they are approved by the board.
Okay.
Not formally. Until we do the budget, when we write
Correct.
the budget, yeah.
So it's, I mean, right now it's in there, so
Yeah.
for consideration, the next time when we have a meeting, you may come back and say, I wanna take that out,
Yeah.
and I wanna take out.
I think now it's just getting consensus on what we want to say is in, so we can get an updated estimate.
I'm not through with the discussion on this yet, though.
Why?
About this position. I just like to have more justification for the position. I don't think
It's
there's
not
enough
really the
justification.
exercise here. I mean, that was a question when Lori gave her presentation.
Well, no, I mean, this is the time to talk about the position.
No,
That's
this
the
is
time.
making sure we get them a list of everything they need to bring us the next budget
But if-
estimate. We can get rid of this position then. But this is why the department heads come in and give us their presentations. So
Well-
there's a time for it then.
We just
Go
heard that,
ahead,
we just
all right?
heard the chief talk about his justification for all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
So
that's
now
because
I'm
we need to get like what the cost was and what we thought was a
Well, that's-
priority.
that's why I'm
Alright,
trying
so
to understand the
let's-
priority
We
behind
we
this.
can go back, we'll come back to the housing position so you can have your discussion on it, Laney. But right now, town beautification, $30,000 is gonna go in the lot. Assistant town manager, I don't think anyone really wants to fund that potential position yet.
No.
Well, two people do.
I propose, Doug, what do you think about the idea that like the communications is currently funded, I think under contracted services for like 60,000.
Right.
I mean, I could see that being a potential for, you know, like if you get a great communications person and then next year you're like, yeah, I really could use an assistant, then maybe there's some succession there or some.
Or that's at
growth-
least
growth
a
opportunity.
candidate among several, perhaps.
Growth opportunity, I mean, ideally, maybe they would have some HR skills, but anyway, if that's the case, you know, and depending on, you have ideas for how, like, it's not a position, it's under contracted services, I don't know if that's.
And what was the amount?
60,000.
Okay, thoughts on 60,000 for that contract? So it was Laney and then Rocket.
So my first question is, who hires this person?
Oh.
Okay, so this person reports to the town manager.
Are we talking about the assistant or the public information?
Public information officer.
Oh,
I thought you were talking about a town manager.
I'm talking about, I think our town would benefit eventually from an assistant town manager. That's up to the town manager. And I was just anecdotally saying, this could be potential, growth potential for a communications person coming in, might be a good candidate for a future assistant town manager.
so you're not advocating for the assistant town manager position?
At this time, no, I mean, I think that,
Okay.
I think,
I guess that was unclear to me. So you're in favor of tabling this year, this line item?
I mean, yeah, if I go, I'd like to hear from Ally.
I do have another thought. I did reach out to Dominic Cloud just because I was interested because he knows Hartford's context and has a lot of experience around the state. And there are at least I know in Essex, for instance, like the public information officer position role is shared with another position to I think amount to a full time. I would be interested in the possibility of if it would make sense, and that's why I asked just Dominic from his perspective. And ultimately, yes, I agree, John, that this would be up to you as about this position. But if the public information officer role and responsibilities might be included in an assistant town manager position, I would be interested in that to potentially sort of combine in a way. I do think that there would be a need for an assistant town manager and public information officer. How that shakes out, open to discussion, but at the very least, we definitely want to make sure we have a public information officer, but I'm also supportive of an assistant town manager in some capacity.
Are we willing to, do we want to see what this is going to cost and put it into our budget?
Well, it's
estimate for next week, for next meeting?
that's just it though. We don't have a salary next to it. At
Well, I
all,
know.
so,
Mr. Chair.
so.
Right?
My, using a metaphor here, if our department heads are a team, town staff is a team, we just hired a new coach. And we haven't even let him play one season. So I think I'm putting a lot of faith and trust, but I think that you'll excel. I have a lot of faith that you will excel, which is not to say that we don't need these other positions, but I would say we just made a ton of changes. Let's just see how it goes. The town is not falling apart for lack of these two positions. Before, again,
Communications, it is. Yeah.
it's not falling apart.
Yeah, but I mean, the point of
It's
this
not falling apart.
exercise is to get everything we might want in there to see what the
Yes,
budget
I-
estimate is.
and
I've
I
said
would
this
like to-
so many times.
I would like to finish my statement uninterrupted, which is that the town is not falling apart for the lack of these. Is it a pain point? Sure. But is it something that our new management and our current leadership team can work to solve? Or is it something that we should immediately be hiring for? That's the question. I agree the problem should be solved. I agree that we can use better communication in town. I agree that we have had less cohesion within our leadership than we would have wanted to. But we've just made in this year an enormous number of changes, positive changes with our leadership team. And my advocacy is that we let them grow. They know that this is something that's on our minds and something that we would be supportive of. But I don't think we need to just keep dumping solutions in when we have a good team. So we let them run.
What would the cost amount for this line be if we were gonna put it into the budget for you to run the numbers?
I've
Because if there
seen,
isn't an associated cost, I just wouldn't bother.
if you're saying you'd like the budget to reflect a combined town manager, assistant town manager, and public information officer, I can probably give you an estimate. If you want to just go with a public information officer, I think we have a figure already in the town manager's budget.
Yeah.
Which is,
60.
that's a full-time position?
I'm not necessarily committed to full-time,
Right now, it's only under contracted services.
Right.
It's not a salary position.
right?
I would be curious to see what a combined public information officer with assistant town manager role could look like.
Yeah, there's a few towns in Vermont that have assistant town managers, and I've already asked the VLCT to provide me those numbers. I think there's 9 of them.
Thank you.
Rocket and then Ken?
Yeah, just a question for John, which is, what is your assessment of the need of a public information officer? And because here I am just sort of waving my hand saying, oh, it's conjecture.
Well,
But it would be
I'm the
good
new
to-
guy who has heard from some select board members that there's a need. I don't have an opinion about it, frankly.
So you're ambivalent as to whether or not that would be helpful to your work? Or
I won't say ambivalent. I just think I'm underinformed because I've just been here for 9 weeks.
And so I think given the lack of, which I understand, given John's newness, I would say, if he comes back to us in even mid-year, February, or let's say April after the budget's been set, and says, listen, this is a really good idea, and I think we should do this, then I think the select board should do everything that we can to support that. But if he says, I've figured out different ways that we can implement solutions, and here's what we've tried, and here's what's working, then I think we run with that. But I think over solving the problem right now, when we have a new town manager who doesn't even know whether or not there is that, what the right solution would be, I think in the absence of a solid recommendation, I think we hold on.
We've got the chief information officer factor into the budget, right?
It's a
Okay.
contracted position, not
Okay.
a salary position.
I'm just trying to get budget numbers,
Yeah.
really. I'm not interested in the wisdom necessarily of whether we have an assistant or that, that's a discussion for another day. Ellie?
Yeah, I mean, I just do want to say that I think at the very least, if that's the right term, I feel really strongly we have some public information officer budgeted for in this budget cycle because this is I've heard from so many community members. That's in our strategic plan for equity and inclusion. There's a lot of historical context about why that is needed. And so I hope we can at least keep that in the budget. It's already budgeted.
Okay, Lanny, and then we'll go back to the housing
Yeah,
position. and I think we're good.
I think that we're spending $60,000 to, and we're not giving John a chance to be the communications chief that we would hope for. So I think we're spending a lot of money and not giving him the opportunity to prove that he's able to handle the task. That's why I'm not in support of this at all.
Okay. Let's finish up with the housing position. I know that you had questions about that, Lanny. What's the cost estimate associated with that?
73,500 and includes benefits.
Okay, 73,500.
Housing development specialist, it's not just specific to housing.
Okay.
And there is a request, an email request saying that, asking for just to better understand the need for this new position. Like, Lori, will you just give a little brief description of the position again?
Position is to work very closely and focuses on housing, but it's also for the economic development piece of our town plan and our housing and economic development. Our housing chapter, we're just finishing that up and we'll be starting very shortly on the update of our economic development section. And we also have a workload in our department that is needed to be addressed. So it's just general departmental developmental issues, those revolving around applications coming in the door. We just had a really heavy load of development over the last year and a half in terms of applications and the demand on staff. And there's just a lot that's not getting done that we want to get done and haven't been able to get to because of the lack of time to do it. And we've taken on additional activities. So I see this person as being a lead for the implementation, as I said, for the town plan housing chapter, staffing the housing and the Hartford Committee on Housing and Homelessness, implementing a housing development program that we've talked about on a small scale level, but really starting to demonstrate the town's commitment towards addressing the critical need in housing. That would also be working with development of a rental registry with the Upper Valley towns, which is part of our housing recommendation in our new chapter. Working with the private developers, local, regional, and state entities to increase opportunities for the variety of housing options in the various incomes. And that could go from anywhere from somebody comes in like BlackRock that's just there and really working closely with them so that they can have mixed income as part of their development of 240 units. Pursuing Hartford home sharing program in partnership with existing programs that exist in the state and in our region, participating in the development and implementation of the town economic development plan that I talked about. Some of the specific activities that we just haven't had time to get to is restarting revitalization programs for all of the 3 state designated village centers, which include Wilder, Hartford Village, and Queechee, and we haven't had any time to really begin to work on those, and we need to have more focus on other parts of our town. Assisting the White River Junction designated downtown program and the TIF district annual reports. It's a critical piece of information, and we just don't have the staffing available to really be on top of that on a regular basis. General assistance to the departments, increased work program that I talked about before, townwide marketing plan and branding, and working with the downtown businesses on development and implementation of the designated downtown. So those are just a few of the things, and I haven't even pulled a lot of these recommendations that
And that's
are in the
that's a 73,000 cost. Lanny?
Yeah, this seems like a tremendous amount of work for $73,000. And the concern that I have within planning development is what we have right now, is that within planning development in the town of Hartford, we don't have any enforcement right now for zoning enforcement or policies that are within the town. And that's an income revenue stream that we could have. Instead of expending money, we need people that can go out there and look at the possible zoning infractions that are happening within the town. I know myself personally of one that we're not doing. The amount of tasks that you just listed off for $73,000 seems unfathomable.
Well, I would beg to differ with you in terms of enforcement. First of all, enforcement is not something that we can tack a fine on to somebody. We have to go to the court, spend money to do enforcement, and it takes anywhere from 6 months to 20 years.
Nobody's even going out and checking on things.
I
though.
don't, we have 5,000 properties in the town. When we are made aware of, or we become aware of something, we go out and investigate it. We work with property owners to come into compliance. And because we don't want to have to incur expenditures, when there is no compliance coming forth, then we start on with legal proceedings. And it has to go to the state courts. We don't have, it's not within the ability of the state statute in Title 24 that allows us to have any infraction on zoning to come under a penalty of a fine. So it's not an income generating thing for us. It actually tends to be a revenue expenditure for us. So what we try and do, and I beg to differ from the interpretation of how we do it.
So board, thoughts on including this in our budget? 73,000.
I'm
See in the
100%
numbers.
on board.
Me too.
Thoughts, Rocket, Laney, Harry?
I don't think you can get the person that do all this for the amount of money.
Well, I think that's a determination Lori makes.
Right.
Do you want to add more to it?
No, I don't think that it's a position worth funding right now.
mean,
I personally believe that the town of Hartford should not be in the housing business.
All right, so do we have four board members who want this included for John, just a second, for John and Gail to run the numbers?
I just didn't hear what Mary said.
I said
It's in the budget now.
It's in the budget now?
Yeah.
Okay,
What is this
Yeah.
direction?
Oh, in support of this position.
Oh,
It's in the budget.
Right.
Okay,
I don't know.
well, we got four.
Well, if there's four,
Yes,
there's
so-
four, I guess, but I think,
In other words, your voice doesn't count.
Well, no, that's how the board works.
So that's basically what you're saying is when you said we got four.
Randy, that's,
No,
Well,
no,
all
Randy,
in, yeah.
Randy, that's
He's
not.
free to say what he wants about the position.
Thank you.
But we are, this is in the budget, right? We're gonna be able to get the
Yeah.
updated numbers for our next meeting.
At the end of it, the majority will rule, but obviously I still have the voice, right? So well, one thing I would say is, it's certainly important that we can get the work backlog, so I do see the need for that. I also, one of the things that you said, I'm skeptical that our town needs a marketing plan, because right now the problem is that we have a housing shortage. So if anything, we need a building plan. We need to, if we're attracting visitors, that's one thing. If we're attracting residents, it's like, well, where are they gonna live, right? We don't even have the housing for it. That's kind of beyond the point. You need a marketing plan if you're gonna market, but if you're gonna market, then you need to have supply for the
For
demand, right?
visitors, for like branding our town, and anyway, so we'll talk about that later. Anyway,
Yeah,
but
just
full support.
whatever thoughts you have, Rocket, and then
Thank
we'll
you.
wrap it up so people.
Gonna be shot down
can-
anyway, so just,
Yeah.
yeah, any thoughts you have?
I mean, what a wasteful, cynical thing to say, you know?
It's a wasteful, cynical thing to say that we've got 4 votes anyway, so.
Alex, and then Gail?
Did we land on the ADU program?
I don't think we have to yet, right? It doesn't affect our bottom line, right?
Correct. That's an
Because it's
ARPA, that's an
funds, and
ARPA
this is
request.
just, we'll have to make a decision, I think, on whether we want, but we're not gonna get into it now, Lori. On whether we want to use the ARPA funds for that. And we're gonna have to figure out if we're gonna say yes to this position, right? I mean, at this point, it's just getting the numbers for this week.
Mr. Chair, I believe Gail had her hand up.
But she did, and
Oh, okay.
we were, I
Okay.
believe I said I was calling.
Oh,
on her
okay.
next, but-
I'm just
okay.
bringing it to your
Gail?
attention.
I was just ready to wrap it up and go over the items that we.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wait a
that's what I
minute,
was
I
thinking.
still have something I want to add to the budget, though.
Lena, you're cutting her off.
I'm not ready to finish here.
Okay, but you're still cutting her off.
And bringing up the ARPA funding, if the board had made a decision that they were not going to use that funding to supplement the operating fund, and that they were going to use it for other items. So, because right now we have the revenue that we're gonna put in of the 2 million for the unassigned fund, so that's what I was gonna ask. I'm ready to
Yep.
go to that point, but I don't know where you guys are.
Now, it sounds like people still have things they want to discuss, so whoever, Lanny, I mean, or Ally?
Go ahead, Alan.
I mean, so, and I apologize, folks, I realize I should have sent this in advance of this meeting, so, and also recognizing, I think I'm feeling tired. So if this is something that, I'm happy to actually, I've done some research, I've calculated some things, so I'm happy to send that in advance of the next meeting so that folks can maybe make a more informed decision. But I do still think that we need to be considering how we are supporting sustainability of our work as select board members. At the very least, planning for the possibility that there could be a motion on town meeting day to increase our compensation. I believe it happens every year, at least in my tenure. So we would at least want to plan for some kind of buffer in the event that that happens. I am also interested in, again, the idea of a dependent care stipend for select board members to support folks from a range of, backgrounds and experiences to be able to participate and have that support. And I also am really curious about supporting committee members' participation. I sent information about S6's committee stipend program. So I have numbers on all of those things and proposed options. And I'm happy to send that ASAP prior to the next meeting, because I think it might be a little too much to get into right now. But I did want to voice that.
Thank you, Ally.
Yeah. So since we've had a chance to talk with Parks and Recreation, we've had a meeting of the folks who are getting the Hometown Heroes program going. And we are now having a mission statement out there that's going to basically be to honor those who have served the town of Hartford in the armed forces and as first responders for the town and the fire and police. And one of the things that we are looking to do is ask for $2,000 to help defray the cost of banners. And one of the things that we want to do in the town for their first year is to get people like Wesley Black up on there for a hometown hero, and people like Tim Rich from the PD as well, and honor those people, and perhaps Walt Moranci, people that have been on there and been stoic first responders of the town of Hartford, to honor these people that have served the town of Hartford throughout their time of service. Wesley Black, not only a firefighter in the town of Hartford, but also a soldier in the armed forces. And I think $2,000 is a very minimal amount to spend to help defray the cost of banners for this. I realize that we have some money in there right now to cover the actual hardware, but I'd like to add another $2,000 to help defray the cost of honoring those that have served the town throughout public service in the fire department and the police department, and also first responders. I mean, also the armed forces from the town of Hartford. And the idea is to have people send us the name of their individual that they would like honored, and we will have the banners printed out and put up there.
Okay, so request for $2,000.
$2,000.
Heroes. Yeah.
I'm definitely not in favor of that, and you probably know, and I'm not in favor of the banners, period. If you're talking about downtown White River Junction, I'm extremely supportive of the World War memorials in Veterans Park, and I think that's a great place where there could be a marquee with different people honored that month to month or year to year could have something that someone could read and actually get a sense of that person, rather than seeing. I drive through towns with those banners on light poles, and it looks like a town has been fleeced by one of those companies that sells banners like a package deal, and you don't really learn anything about the individuals. They're just, I find it cheapens the respect that one can have for.
Well, the banners we're planning on doing are going to have like a QR code to learn more about the people. And again, it's a way we're not just having this about military people. I think it's a great way to honor those that are served in the town of Hartford. And, like I say, Wesley Black, look at how much Wesley Black did for this town, and people like, Ed Levitt, Tim Rich.
I will oppose the banners in the downtown unequivocally going forward. So I'm just expressing that, and I'm happy to discuss this further. Again, maybe not tonight, but the rest of the board can chime in however they want, but I will definitely not support that.
Can we add the 2,000 for hometown heroes to the budget? Just so we get the estimate and then we can discuss whether we want to
Is that
approve it.
in
like-
Parks and Rec or in the town
Parks and-
manager's
Parks and
budget?
Rec.
Parks
Do we
and
know
Rec.
if the majority of the board is
Yeah.
supportive?
Yeah,
Well, we don't.
we can come back,
But I mean, the question is, do we want to discuss now and decide whether we want to add the money now, or do we want to table it to the next meeting? I don't really care.
I don't want to add it at all, so.
Right?
I am not supportive of these banners either. I think, I don't agree with your reason about the town being policed. Like, for example, some of the towns during COVID did their like high school seniors graduating. And I actually thought it was really nice, a very nice acknowledgement. So I can see why you would want to do that. And I can support that reasoning. I think it's aesthetically questionable, so I agree with you there, Kim. And B, and Lanny, you might agree for this reason, it's the same reason, although I missed the vote, that I would have voted against the flagpole policy of flying the K flag or the pride flag here at Town Hall. It just opens the door for like a lot of select board meetings arguing about which flag is acceptable and which is not, and whose face is right and whose is not. And I think in both cases, the logic is that is beyond the scope of the select board. Let's just administer the town. I do think memorials are a wonderful, valuable way to acknowledge service and sacrifice. I think this is a step too far.
Do you want to do a straw vote on it? Folks? So the motion is to add $2,000 to the budget for the hometown heroes banners. Lanny?
yep, definitely, yes.
So Lanny's yes, Rocket?
No.
Ally?
No.
Mary?
No,
Dan?
this is not an official vote.
Yeah, it's not an official vote, but
Dan says
Kim?
no.
I will vote yes. All right, so we're not putting on the hometown. Okay, so just to recap, I guess, before we go, well, Gail, maybe you want to take the lead on what you've gotten from us. So we got the 2 million.
2 million, we're gonna add for revenue from the unassigned fund.
And we're gonna look for lot funding for Lyman Point, beautification, and the ambulance.
Correct.
Now I don't put my computer down, but community nurse,
150,
yeah, well, H Corey, 5,000.
policy.
Digitization.
Digitization, yeah. Tree warden gets his 17,500. One community resource liaison. The housing position, I know I must have skipped something there.
Crime
Yeah.
data analysis.
Yeah, I think probably we should just go through the ones that we're actually adding.
Yeah.
If we could do that, so we have, do you mind if I do it?
No, you do it, it's my computer.
Okay, so community nurse, 150,000, policy digitization, 5,000, 5,000 for the climate action reserve. Follow up on that to find out if it's supposed to be more than that. Increasing tree wardens from 15 to 17,500.
Mhm.
Community resource person for HPD, 94,000, crime data analyst, one position, 94,000. And rough estimate of 50,000 for interest only payment for station 2. So those adjustments, we started with 22,129,000 for our budget and some change. With these additions tonight, you added $335,500 to the general fund.
300.
And we don't want to, the other revenues, we talked about fire prevention.
I discussed areas where we might want to consider more bullish estimates on revenue, but we didn't really discuss them as a group tonight. I'd be happy to compare notes with
Maybe we could
Gail
talk about
about
that again
that.
next time, in the next wrap up, like, do you think that's not a good idea, the fire prevention? Something, it was like 231,000 and then it was budgeted for 80,000.
I think the best person to answer that would be Chief Cooney, and
Oh, yeah.
He did discuss it during his presentation as well, but certainly would defer to that.
Yeah, I think we generated, like you said, 231,000 last year in revenue.
Because of
And then, yeah, and this year we budgeted 100 to be safe. It's really a moving target because it all depends on the amount of projects that's coming through the planning and zoning office that we have jurisdiction. So I know they've got some big projects on the docket, but I don't believe any of them have been approved. The biggest one has not been approved. If the biggest one is approved, then it would be a significant revenue impact to the public safety revenue for that specific project alone. But it's really depending on whether it's approved or not. Yeah, so there's revenue to be had there, but especially with that one project alone.
Yeah.
That would change that revenue number substantially.
Thank you.
Kim, I think in the same way that you encourage us looking at last year's expenses, from like a planning standpoint, for me, I would advocate that we shift towards using last year's revenue, like the actual dollars revenue, towards this year's towards next year's budget, rather than planning for next year's revenue for next year's budget. Because the thing with the revenue is that you just never know if it's going to go up or down. Like we can give our best projection, but I think planning for expenses, which are going to be real, for revenue, which is currently hypothetical, is kind of a dangerous game. The same way with lot. I feel like maybe we could just take, and I don't know, maybe Gail, I don't know what that would take for us to basically use that as our line item, you know, in terms of last year's revenue as the revenue line item, rather than next year's revenue as the revenue line item. Because one is real and one is projected.
Well, if one is concerned about the growing fund balance, not recognizing trends in revenues might result in more money being taxed than is necessary.
Yeah, I mean, it just.
I can understand that
And
counter.
I think that year after year, like, we just like, we're going up a little, we're going up a little, we're going up a little.
Yeah.
And I think there just is, I think we've got some cushion in there, that's all.
Well, I would just advocate that, like, I'm fine with spending all that revenue. I mean, it does, for John's exact reason, like, help us, that's money that we don't have to tax, right? But I would just say, like, why don't we use money that we have in the bank rather than money we expect to have in the bank? Because we are committing ourselves to a certain degree to purchases or to line items. So that's cash out. It's best to know what we have cash in for sure. And I just think that people are like, well, who knows? Who would have predicted COVID, right? So nobody would have predicted the disruption. Who would have predicted the inflation that followed the following year? There's just like, I think we should be humble in the fact that we don't really know what the future holds.
My plan certainly would be to talk with Gail about the half a dozen tweaks I would suggest on the revenue side. Certainly, if she has good arguments, and I'm sure that she's well versed in these things, not to make those changes, we won't. But if we do make any changes, we'll highlight them for you when we meet next.
Sure.
Okay, moving along, consent agenda, there is none. I will take a motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn.
I'll
Do I have a
second.
second from Mary? All those in favor say aye.
Get that.
So, do we have a path forward?
What's that?
Do we have a path forward from here for the budget?
Well, do you want to pick a date for our next budget-related meeting? Because we have a regular meeting
We have
on
a
the
regular meeting
12th.
on the 12th.
Do you want to meet in the off week on the 19th or sooner?
There should be already one.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
there's,
there's one on the 19th, and there's also a potential wrap up on Thursday, the 14th.
yeah.
Did we not meet?
No, I have 21st.
We did not.
Did tell you
We
guys.
did not.
We did not. Lana had said there was no way to deal
Kim, I
with
have
the
19
Valley
and 21.
News stuff during the
I think
holidays.
the 26 as well.
And
Could not be
26,
done
yeah.
26.
And we definitely need to have that meeting, and plus we're
I
gonna
thought
have to do one of the backup meetings.
Yeah, so the question is, when would you like to meet next, aside from the regular select board sessions?
About the 14th.
I can do the 14th.
I mean, it's never fun, the two meetings in 1 week, but the 14th,
Yeah.
that'll
Right.
give everyone enough time to get the estimates. Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, what,
Yeah.
did we actually adjourn or did?
We did.
We did.
Okay.
No, we did not vote on it yet. We had discussion, but we did not
I
vote.
seconded it.
We had a motion, and a second. I said all those in favor.
You didn't have discussion.
Okay, let's have discussion.
That's fine. That's why I was having a discussion about what we're coming back to. I just want to make sure that,
No, you're right.
I just want to make sure I understand what John's bringing back to us next time around.
Right.
I vote
I mean,
aye.
that's,
You can ask him individually. I think I know what he's coming back to us with.
well, we
And we've
should,
adjourned.
we should all know that.
So the answer is,
Yeah. yeah.
Gail and I are gonna run numbers based on what you've inputted tonight. And if there's additional changes we have in mind that we think are good ideas, we'll make those too, but we'll notify you of those changes in some kind of a submission that you'll get before the December 14th meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick.
It's sausage making.
It's what?
Sausage making.